Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 had the Red Ultimatrix. But before we start, I want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Crimson Genesis. The ancient Galvan outpost loomed before B.N. Tennyson like a metallic cathedral half swallowed by the jungle. Vines thick as his forearm snaked through cracked walls bearing mathematical formulas too complex for Earth scientists to decipher. Noon sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting fractured patterns across corroded metal that hadn't seen visitors in millennia. Scan shows temporal distortions increasing. Rook Blanco's voix carried the practiced calm of a veteran plumber. His proto-tool hummed softly as it calibrated, similar to the readings from Maltruant's last appearance, but different. Ben rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle into his muscles. At 18, he'd grown into his lanky frame, standing nearly 6 feet tall with a physique hardened by years of combat. The standard-issue black and green plumber uniform fit him well now, though he still insisted on keeping his signature jacket. Different how? Ben asked, eyes tracking the movement of shadows that seemed too fluid for mere jungle fauna. Broader wavelength. Less focused. Rook's feline eyes narrowed, as though time itself is bleeding. Ben tapped the Ultimatrix on his wrist, the familiar green device humming in response. Then let's find the wound and patch it up. The entrance yawned before them, a geometric arch carved with Galvan script that even Rook's translator struggled with. Beyond it, darkness waited like a physical presence, swallowing their flashlight beams with unsettling hunger. I am detecting multiple life forms within, Rook said, his proto-tool shifting to defensive configuration. But their biometric signatures are fluctuating. Ben's lips quirked into a half-smile. When aren't they? They advanced into the structure's cool interior. The temperature dropped 10 degrees immediately, and moisture beaded on metal surfaces that hummed with dormant energy. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, sometimes returning seconds later as though time hiccuped around them. This architecture predates modern Galvan design by at least 40,000 years, Rook observed, trailing his fingers along wall inscriptions that depicted star systems in configurations no modern astronomer would recognize. Azimuth never mentioned outposts this old, Ben said, ducking beneath a low archway. Which means either he doesn't know about it, or he intentionally kept it hidden, Rook finished. The corridor widened into a vast chamber where the ceiling vanished into darkness. At its center stood a platform of concentric rings, each inscribed with mathematical formulas Hat seemed to shift when viewed directly. Surrounding the platform were 12 equidistant pillars, crackling with faint energy that made Ben's teeth ache. Definitely getting Maltruant vibes, Ben muttered, approaching the platform cautiously. But this tech looks different than his. Older, maybe. Something skittered across the distant ceiling, too fast for either of them to identify. We are not alone, Rook whispered. Weapon raised. When are we ever? Ben replied, fingers hovering over the Ultimatrix. Let's shed some light on our mystery guests. In a flash of emerald energy, Ben's human form disappeared, replaced by the crystalline body of chromastone. Purple light emanated from his form, illuminating the chamber's furthest reaches. What the light revealed froze both plumbers in place. Clinging to the ceiling and walls were humanoid figures in sleek armor that seemed to phase between solid matter and translucent energy. Their helmets contained no visible eye slits, only swirling temporal readouts that fluctuated constantly. Each carried weapons that resembled ornate clockwork harpoons connected to retractable tethers. Time hunters, Rook breathed. I thought they were merely legends. One of the figures tilted its head, regarding them with cold calculation. When it spoke, its voice echoed before and after the words themselves, SGXG. I'm guessing diplomacy isn't an option, Ben said, channeling energy through his crystalline body. As if in response, the hunters head themselves from their perches with synchronized precision. They moved like liquid mercury, their forms leaving temporal afterimages as they attacked. Split up, Ben shouted, unleashing a blast of prismatic energy that caught the nearest hunter mid-leap. The beam passed through its body, which rippled like disturbed water before reforming. Rook's proto-tool cycled through 3 different RGY frequencies before finding one that connected solidly with the hunter's armor. modulating to temporal frequency 7.3. Aim for their tether mechanisms. Ben nodded, redirecting his energy toward the clockwork devices at the hunters' waists. 2 of them recoiled as their equipment sparked and malfunctioned. A third launched its harpoon directly at Ben's chest. He twisted, but the weapon swerved in midair, tracking him with impossible precision. The harpoon struck with enough force to shatter his crystalline form. Instead of impaling him, it phased partially into his chest, its clockwork components spinning furiously. Ben felt a terrible pulling sensation as though the weapon was attempting to extract him from the timeline itself. Ben! Rook's shout seemed to come from miles away. Hi! N lanced through Ben's body as the Ultimatrix on his chest flickered erratically. The device began cycling through alien forms without his input, flashing glimpses of Swampfire, 4 arms, Humungosaur, before stabilizing again as Chromastone. With a roar of effort, Ben channeled every ounce of energy he could muster into the Ultimatrix symbol. The resulting feedback pulse blasted the harpoon from his chest and sent its wielder crashing into a distant pillar. I need something faster, Ben gasped, slapping the Ultimatrix symbol. In a flash, Chromastone was replaced by XLR-8. The Kinesolaran form blurred into motion, racing circles around the hunters. Their weapons tracked him with decreasing effectiveness as he accelerated beyond their temporal prediction algorithms. Their targeting systems can't compensate for extreme speed differentials. Ben called to Rook, who had taken a defensive position behind one of the pillars. Keep them occupied for 10 seconds. Understood, Rook replied, Proto-Tool morphing into a multi-barrel configuration that unleashed a barrage of energy bolts calibrated to the hunter's frequency. Ben pushed his speed to the limit, creating a vortex around the central platform. As the hunters focused their attacks on Rook, Ben noticed something he'd missed before. Beneath the accumulated dust on the platform's surface was a recessed compartment pulsing with crimson light. That's not standard Galvan tech, Ben thought, momentum carrying him in tightening circles toward the platform's center. One of the hunters noticed his trajectory and fired a harpoon to intercept. Ben leapt over it, his Kinesolaran reflexes allowing him to twist in midair and land directly on the platform. The moment his feet touched the central ring, the entire chamber hummed with activation energy. The platform's rings began rotating in alternating directions, and the crimson light intensified. Seams appeared in the platform's surface, revealing an intricate mechanism rising from beneath. At its center was a device that resembled the Ultimatrix, but instead of green, it glowed with deep crimson energy. Its design was more angular, with components that looked almost predatory. Ben! Rook shouted, do not touch that device. My scanner indicates it's. The rest of his warning was lost as all 6 hunters redirected their attack toward the platform, firing harpoons simultaneously. Ben's speed allowed him to dodge 5, but the 6th clipped his shoulder, sending him sprawling across the platform. His hand instinctively reached out to catch himself, and landed directly on the crimson device. The moment of contact sent a shockwave through the chamber powerful enough to throw the hunters against the walls. The Ultimatrix on Ben's chest began sparking, green energy arcing between it and the crimson device. Pain unlike anything Ben had experienced tore through his body as XLR-8's form destabilized, cycling rapidly through his alien roster before returning him to human form. What's happening? Ben gasped, trying to pull away from the device and finding himself unable to break contact. The crimson device liquefied, flowing up his arm like metallic blood. It enveloped the Ultimatrix, merging with it in a display of competing energies. The green of the original device fought against the encroaching crimson, creating a spectacular light show that illuminated the entire chamber. One of the hunters recovered faster than the others, launching itself toward Ben with weapon ready. Rook fired a precision shot that caught the hunter mid-leap. But 2 more were already in motion. Ben struggled against the device fusing to his wrist, his face contorted with effort. Whatever you're going to do, Ben, do it now. Rook shouted, Proto-Tool overheating from sustained fire. With a final surge of energy, the crimson substance completely enveloped the Ultimatrix. The green hourglass symbol flickered once, twice, then stabilized as deep red. The pain subsided instantly, replaced by a rush of power that made Ben's previous transformations feel like child's play. Acting on instinct, Ben activated the transformed device. The interface that appeared was similar to the Ultimatrix but with additional functions and alien forms he'd never seen before. Without fully understanding how, he selected Diamond Head and slammed his hand down on the symbol. The transformation was instantaneous. No flash of light, no transition period. One moment Ben was human, the next he was Diamond Head, but unlike any version he'd used before. His crystalline body gleamed with internal energy, edges sharper, form more streamlined and efficient. Red energy lines traced complex patterns across his surface, and the Ultimatrix symbol on his chest glowed crimson. "This is different," Ben said, his voice deeper and resonating with crystalline harmonics. The nearest hunter fired its harpoon. Ben didn't dodge. Instead, he caught the weapon mid-flight. The tether went taut, and Ben pulled, yanking the hunter off balance. With his free hand, he generated a crystal shard and severed the tether with surgical precision. "Definitely different," he amended, a smile forming on his crystalline face. The hunters regrouped, communicating in staccato temporal language before attacking as one. Ben moved with newfound grace, ch motion flowing into the next as though he'd trained with this enhanced form for years. Crystal barriers erupted from the floor to block incoming attacks, while precision shards disabled two hunters' mobility systems. "Ben, your control is impressive," Rook called, rejoining the fight with calculated shots. "It feels like I've been Diamond Head for decades," Ben replied, generating a crystal sword that hummed with energy. "Like I know everything this form can do." The lead hunter paused its attack, helmet readouts spinning rapidly. SSG. S. Quote. The remaining hunters retreated to defensive positions around a specific section of wall. Their weapons reconfigured, firing not at Ben and Rook but at the wall itself. The combined energy created a swirling temporal distortion that began to widen. "They're opening a portal," Rook warned, scanner beeping urgently. "Energy signature indicates something large coming through." "Not if I close it first," Ben replied, placing his hands on the ground. Crystal spread across the chamber floor with impossible speed, forming an intricate lattice that climbed the walls. As it reached the developing portal, the crystals began absorbing the temporal energy, their structure vibrating at precisely the frequency needed to disrupt the portal's formation. The NTERS fired desperately at the advancing crystal, but for every section they destroyed, 3 more grew to replace it. Within seconds, the portal destabilized, collapsing in on itself with a thunderous implosion that staggered everyone in the chamber. Before the hunters could regroup, the central pillar behind them cracked open, disgorging a creature that defied conventional description. It stood, 9 feet tall with a body that seemed assembled from different time periods. Portions appeared mechanical with gears and pistons, while others were composed of shifting energy or biological components that constantly evolved. Its face was a blank mask with a single vertical line that pulsed with each word it spoke. It intoned, voice echoing from multiple points in time simultaneously. XG.S. The creature, clearly a chronarch based on Paradox's rare descriptions, extended a limb toward Ben. The air between them distorted as localized time accelerated to near infinite speed. Everything caught in the field, dust, debris, even light itself, aged thousands of years in seconds, decaying to fundamental particles. Ben rolled clear, the enhanced diamond head form allowing him to process information faster than should have been possible. Rook, fall back to the entrance. Negative, Rook replied, taking position behind a pillar. We contain this threat together. The chronarch turned its attention to Rook, apparently identifying him as the weaker target. It gestured, and the pillar Rook used for cover began aging rapidly, crumbling to dust. Ben didn't hesitate. He charged the chronarch directly, crystal body absorbing temporal energy with each step. The creature's attacks intensified, years of decay compressed into milliseconds. But Ben's enhanced form resisted better than expected. You want a timeline convergence. Ben growled, closing the distance. Let's see how you handle this. He met his hand against the crimson Ultimatrix symbol on his chest. Energy cascaded through his form as the device spoke in a voice deeper than the original Ultimatrix. Apex evolution activated. Diamond Head's form shifted again, crystal structure reorganizing at the molecular level. His body grew larger, more angular, with crystalline constructs that resembled organic machinery. The red energy lines multiplied. forming complex circuitry patterns across his surface. Geometric wings of razor-sharp crystal extended from his back, and a crown-like formation emerged from his head. Apex Diamond Head, Ben announced, voice resonating with harmonic frequencies that made the very air vibrate. The Chronarch paused, its temporal readouts spinning frantically. The hunters backed away, weapons lower-ing slightly in what appeared to be the first indication of uncertainty. Ben didn't give them time to reconsider. He thrust his hands forward, and the chamber floor erupted with crystalline growth unlike anything he'd created before. These formations moved with purpose, targeting the hunters with precision. Within seconds, 5 of the 6 were encased in crystal cocoons that nullified their temporal signatures. The Chronarch attacked with renewed vigor, unleashing a wave of temporal energy that would have reduced a normal being to cosmic dust. Ben met the assault with crystal barriers that not only blocked the attack but absorbed its energy. Each absorption made his form glow brighter until he radiated power like a miniature sun. "This ends now," Ben declared. He brought his hands together, channeling the absorbed energy into a focused beam. The Chronarch attempted to phase between time periods to avoid the attack, but Ben's beam tracked it, striking with perfect precision. The creature's form destabilized, portions of it existing in different temporal states simultaneously. With a final push of power, Ben completed the attack. The Chronarch's body collapsed in on itself, compressed into a perfect crystal sphere no larger than a marble. Inside, temporal energies swirled in endless patterns, contained but not destroyed. The transformation complete, Ben surveyed the chamber. 5 hunters trapped in crystal, 1 Chronarch contained, and the 6th hunter. "Rook, behind you." The warning came too late. The final hunter had circled during the battle, its weapon reconfigured into a different form. It fired not at Rook directly, but at the ceiling above him. A section of ancient metal groaned and collapsed, burying the Ravanagonder under tons of debris. "No," Ben shouted, crystal wings propelling him across the chamber faster than human eyes could track. He landed beside the rubble pile and began clearing it with methodical precision, creating crystal support structures to prevent further collapse. Within seconds, he uncovered Rook's unconscious form, bloodied but alive. The remaining hunter took advantage of Ben's distraction, activating a temporal devic that began tearing a hole in space-time. Unlike the previous portal attempt, this one stabilized quickly, creating an escape route. Ben faced a choice: pursue the escaping hunter or tend to his injured partner. It was no choice at all. "Go," a voice called from the chamber entrance. "I'll help your friend." Ben turned to see a woman silhouetted in the doorway, archaeological equipment slung over one shoulder. Even in the dim light, he recognized her immediately. Kai Green stepped forward, her expression all business. She wore practical expedition gear, her long black hair pulled back in a tight braid. Years of archaeological fieldwork had hardened the teenager Ben once knew into a confident professional. "That thing's escaping with data about whatever just happened to you," she said. Already kneeling beside Rook and checking his vitals. "I've got medical training. Go." Ben nodded once, then launched himself toward the portal, crystal wings catching the light in crimson patterns. The hunter had already passed through, but the portal remained stable, likely designed to allow the others to follow once they escaped their crystal prisons. Without hesitation, Ben entered the swirling vortex. Temporal energy washed over him, trying to disassemble his molecular structure and scatter it across multiple timestreams. His apex form resisted, the crystalline structure reinforcing itself against the dimensional stresses. He emerged into a vast chamber unlike anything he'd seen before. The architecture defied Euclidean geometry, with walkways that curved impossibly and structures that seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously. Everywhere, temporal energy flowed like water, channeled through conduits that resembled arteries in some cosmic organism. The hunter was already halfway across the chamber, moving toward what appeared to be a central data repository, a massive crystalline structure where information from countless timelines converged. Ben accelerated, crystal wings propelling him forward with unnatural speed. "Stop right there," he commanded, voice echoing strangely in the temporal architecture. The hunter spun, firing a last desperate shot. Ben deflected it easily, then encased the hunter in crystal before it could react further. With the immediate threat contained, he approached the data repository cautiously. The structure pulsed with information, images, sounds, and data from countless potential timelines. As Ben drew closer, certain images began resolving with greater clarity, himself wielding the crimson device in various scenarios, some heroic, others disturbing. He reached out tentatively, crystal fingertips brushing the repository's surface. Immediately, information flooded his consciousness, fragments of knowledge about the device now fused to his wrist. Red Ultimatrix, forbidden technology, created by Zenith, Azimuth's exiled apprentice, designed to evolve species beyond natural limits, integrates with wielder's consciousness. Asterisk. The information stream became overwhelming, threatening to overload even his enhanced processing capabilities. Ben pulled back, severing the connection. He'd learned enough to understand the basic nature of what he now carried, and to know it was potentially more dangerous than any technology he'd encountered before. A rumbling vibration shook the chamber. The portal behind him fluctuated wildly, its edges beginning to collapse. Without the hunters to maintain it, the connection was failing. Ben grabbed the crystallized hunter and flew back toward the portal at maximum speed. Passing through just as it collapsed behind him, he emerged into the Galvan outpost chamber to find Kai helping a semi-conscious Rook to his feet. She startled at Ben's transformed appearance, hand instinctively moving toward the sidearm holstered at her hip. "Relax," Ben said, crystal form shimmering as he deactivated the Apex mode, reverting to standard Diamond Head. "It's still me." "Define me," Kai replied, not lowering her guard, because whatever that transformation was, it didn't look like any Petrosapian I've ever seen. Ben touched the crimson Ultimatrix symbol, returning to human form. The device on his wrist retained its red coloration, the hourglass symbol pulsing with energy that seemed almost alive. "It's called the Red Ultimatrix," he explained, examining the device with newfound wariness. "And from what I just learned, it shouldn't exist." Rook coughed, still leaning heavily on Kai for support. "Azimuth never mentioned such technology." "Because Azimuth didn't create it," Ben replied. "It was made by someone named Zenith, apparently Azimuth's former apprentice." Kai's eyes narrowed. "That matches inscriptions I found in the outer chamber. They refer Ensa Galvan exile who believed evolution required intervention." The remaining hunter cocoons began to vibrate, temporal energy building around them as their occupants attempted to break free. "We need to leave," Ben said. Supporting Rook's other side, "I contained the Chronarch, but these hunters will eventually escape, and I'd rather not be here when they do." "Agreed," Kai said, helping guide Rook toward the exit. "My camp is 2 kilometers east. We can regroup there." They navigated the outpost corridors quickly, emerging into jungle heat that felt oppressive after the chamber's cool interior. Ben noticed his perception had changed subtly. He was more aware of his surroundings, processing information faster than before. The Red Ultimatrix hummed softly against his skin, its presence both reassuring and concerning. "How did you find this place?" Ben asked Kai as they made their way through dense undergrowth. "I've been tracking unusual temporal signatures for the Plumbers, Archaeological Division," she replied. Machete slicing efficiently through vines. "This site has been giving off readings for months, but they intensified 3 days ago." Coinciding with Maltruant's last appearance, Rook noted. "Recovering enough to walk with minimal support." "Exactly," Kai confirmed. "I thought there might be a connection." Ben considered this, absently rubbing the Red Ultimatrix. The hunters mentioned a timeline convergence. Whatever Maltruant did might have weakened temporal barriers enough for them to detect this device. They emerged into a small clearing where Kai had established a research camp. Solar panels powered monitoring equipment, and a modest tent provided shelter. She helped Rook to a collapsible chair, then retrieved a medical kit from her supplies. "You've upgraded since the last time we worked together," Ben observed, noting the advanced technology integrated into her supposedly archaeological equipment. Kai smirked. "The Plumbers, Archaeological Division has better funding than regular universities. Plus, when you're potentially dealing with alien artifacts, standard gear doesn't cut it." As she treated Rook's injuries, Ben examined the Red Ultimatrix more carefully. Its interface was similar to his previous device but with additional functions he didn't recognize. When he accessed the transformation menu, he was startled to find aliens he'd never encountered before alongside his familiar roster. This thing has DNA samples I've never seen, he murmured. And the ones I do know have evolved somehow. Rook glanced up. WIN seeing as Kai cleaned a gash on his forehead. The hunters called it a Red Ultimatrix breach. They seemed to consider it a significant threat. With good reason, Kai said, applying a regenerative bandage to Rook's wound. If the inscriptions are accurate, Zenith was exiled for creating technology that forced evolutionary leaps. Azimuth believed natural evolution should take its course, but Zeni argued that intervention was necessary for species to reach their true potential. Sounds like standard mad scientist philosophy, Ben remarked. Except Zenith wasn't mad, just determined, Kai corrected. The inscriptions describe extensive testing, precise methodology, and careful documentation. This wasn't created in a frenzy of inspiration. It was methodically designed for a specific purpose. Ben frowned. Which is? Kai finished treating Rook and turned her full attention to Ben. The inscription fragments I translated suggest it was designed to create what Zenith called the ultimate evolutionary vector, essentially. A being capable of directing the evolutionary course of entire species. That's concerning, Rook said, understating dramatically. Ben stared at the device on his wrist, its crimson glow reflecting in his eyes. We need to contact Azimuth immediately. If anyone knows how to remove this thing safely, it's him. Agreed, Rook said, reaching for his plumber badge. He tapped it twice, but instead of the expected connection, they heard only static. Communications are being blocked. The temporal distortions might be interfering, Kai suggested, checking her own equipment. My satellite uplink is down too. Ben activated the Red Ultimatrix's holographic interface. Maybe this thing has communication capabilities we can use. As he navigated the unfamiliar menus, a sudden pain lanced through his head. Images flashed behind his eyes. Schematics, equations, genetic sequences too complex for human comprehension. The pain subsided as quickly as it had come, leaving behind fragments of knowledge that hadn't been there before. Ben. Kai's voice seemed distant. He blinked, finding both Kai and Rook staring at him with concern. I'm fine. I think this device is doing something to my mind. Elaborate, Rook prompted, leaning forward despite his injuries. It's like downloading information directly into my brain, Ben explained, struggling to articulate the sensation. Not all at once, but in bursts. I just learned how to access its communication systems, but I didn't read it anywhere, I just suddenly knew. Kai exchanged a worried glance with Rook. That matches Zenith's notes. The device was designed to integrate with its user's consciousness, enhancing cognitive abilities to handle the evolutionary knowledge it contains. Integration with consciousness, Ben repeated, alarm evident in his voice. As in, it's merging with my mind. Gradually. Yes, Kai confirmed, reaching for her tablet. She pulled up images of inscriptions, pointing to specific symbols. According to this, the process occurs in stages. Initial bonding, cognitive enhancement, evolutionary understanding, and finally what's called ascension. Though that term's translation is uncertain, Ben felt a chill that had nothing to do with the jungle evening setting in. Can it be reversed? Kai hesitated. The inscriptions don't mention reversal. Either it wasn't possible, or Zenith never considered it necessary. Wonderful, Ben muttered, examining the device with new wariness. So I'm stuck with alien technology that's rewriting my brain. Hunters from outside time want to contain me, and we can't call for backup. An accurate summary of our situation, Rook agreed with characteristic understatement. Darkness had fallen completely now, the jungle around them alive with sounds of nocturnal creatures. Kai activated perimeter security devices, small spheres that projected energy barriers around the camp, before turning on solar-powered lamps. We should rest, she suggested. The temporal disturbances are strongest at night according to my readings. We can try communications again in the morning. Ben nodded absently, still focused on the Red Ultimatrix. Despite the obvious dangers, he couldn't deny a certain fascination with the device's capabilities. The Apex transformation had felt incredible, not just powerful, but right somehow. As though he'd finally accessed his transformation's true potential. I'll take first watch, he said, rising from his seat. I don't think I could sleep anyway. Kai looked like she wanted to argue but simply nodded. Wake me in 4 hours. And Ben, try not to use that thing unless absolutely necessary. At least until we understand it better. No promises, Ben replied with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. But I'll try. As Rook and Kai settled in for rest, Ben paced the perimeter of the camp, lost in thought. The red Ultimatrix hummed softly against his skin, IT's presence a constant reminder of the changes already beginning within him. He could feel it working even now, subtle adjustments to his perception, information processing, perhaps even his basic neurochemistry. Part of him wanted to activate it again, to explore the new transformations and capabilities it offered. Another part recognized the wisdom in Kai's caution. If the device was indeed integrating with his consciousness, each use might accelerate the process. His contemplation was interrupted by a soft beeping from the red Ultimatrix. The holographic interface activated automatically, displaying a map of the surrounding area with a pulsing indicator approximately 1 kilometer north of their position. What the? Ben muttered, zooming in on the reading. The device responded to his thought before he could even touch the interface, enhancing the image to show a small structure partially hidden beneath jungle foliage. Temporal energy readings surrounded it, similar to but distinct from those at the outpost. Ben glanced back at the sleeping forms of Kai and Rook, weighing his options. The responsible choice would be to wake them, share the information, and plan accordingly. The impulsive choice would be to investigate alone, possibly learning more about the device without putting them at risk. He chose a middle path, activating the red Ultimatrix's recording function. Another capability he somehow knew it possessed. He left a detailed message explaining what he'd found and where he was going. He placed the recording in standby mode, set to activate if either Kai or Rook woke before his return. With that precaution taken, Ben selected an alien form from the interface. His finger hovered over XLR8, but something drew his attention to an unfamiliar silhouette, alive. Predatory form labeled in Galvan's script that somehow translated in his mind as Phantasma. Curiosity overcoming caution, Ben selected the new alien and pressed down on the symbol. The transformation was instantaneous and smooth, none of the disorienting energy surge he was accustomed to. His body shifted into a form that seemed composed of living shadow, wisps of darkness extending from his limbs and torso. Red energy lines traced his silhouette, and crimson eyes glowed from a face with no other discernible features. "Whoa," Ben whispered, his voice now a resonant hiss that barely disturbed the air. "This is new." Experimentally, he willed himself to move forward. His form responded by partially dissipating, flowing through the air like smoke before reconstituting a meter away. He tried again with similar results, quickly mastering the shadow gliding locomotion. Additional abilities revealed themselves as though remembered rather than discovered. He could render himself nearly invisible in darkness, pass through solid objects with concentration, and detect thermal signatures across significant distances. Most impressively, he could manipulate his density from near intangy BLE to solid enough to interact with physical objects. Phantasma, he repeated, appreciating the name's appropriateness. Definitely adding you to the favorites list. With a final glance at his sleeping companions, Ben glided into the jungle. Phantasma's form was perfectly adapted for nocturnal stealth, allowing him to move silently through dense vegetation that would have hindered any other form. The thermal vision ability revealed creatures hiding in the canopy above, some Earth species, others decidedly not, but none posed any threat to his current form. He reached the structure in minutes, far faster than would have been possible even as XLR8 given the challenging terrain. From a distance, it appeared to be nothing more than a mound of earth and stone, the kind of natural formation easily overlooked by casual observers. Closer inspection revealed geometric precision too perfect for nature, and faint energy signatures pulsing beneath the surface. Ben circled the structure, seeking an entrance. Phantasma's phase-shifting ability allowed him to partially penetrate solid surfaces, giving him glimpses of what lay within without fully committing to entry. After a complete circuit, he identified what appeared to be a sealed doorway on the northern face. The door bore markings similar to those in the outpost but arranged in a pattern suggesting a locking mechanism rather than simple inscription. Ben extended a shadowy tendril toward the markings, surprising himself when Galvan's script appeared within his mind, translating the lock's requirements. 3-part temporal key sequence, past configuration, present alignment, future potential. Asterisk. Great, Ben muttered. A time-based puzzle lock. He studied the mechanism more carefully, noticing how certain symbols shifted sub-TLY when observed from different angles, as though existing in multiple states simultaneously. An idea formed, and Ben adjusted Phantasma's density, becoming just intangible enough to perceive temporal energy without losing physical form entirely. The lock revealed its secrets. 3 concentric rings of symbols, each representing a different temporal state. The outer ring showed configurations that had existed in the past. The middle ring current alignments, and the inner ring potential future states. To unlock the door, he needed to align one symbol from each ring into a cohesive sequence. Ben focused, allowing the knowledge flowing from the Red Ultimatrix to guide his choices. His shadowy fingers manipulated the rings with precision, aligning symbols representing concepts his human mind couldn't fully comprehend but that Phantasma's form somehow understood. With the final alignment, the door receded into the ground, revealing a narrow passage leading downward. Ben glided forward cautiously, thermal vision scanning for traps or guardians. Finding none, he descended into darkness that would have been impenetrable to human eyes but was merely textured shadow to Phantasma's perception. The passage opened into a small chamber with a single pedestal at its center. Upon the pedestal rested a crystalline data storage device, clearly Galvan in origin but of the same antiquated design as the outpost technology. Temporal energy surrounded it in protective layers, preventing casual access. Ben approached slowly, sensing rather than seeing the security measures in place. Unlike the brute force approach he might have attempted years ago, he analyzed the defenses methodically, identifying patterns and vulnerabilities in the energy matrix. "Definitely not thinking like my old self," he murmured. The observation both reassuring and concerning. Using Phantasma's fine control over density, Ben extended a tendril of shadow through microscopic gaps in the temporal barrier. The tendril solidified just enough to make contact with the data crystal, establishing a connection without triggering the security measures. Information flowed into his consciousness, fragmented at first, then coalescing into coherent concepts. This was a research outpost established by Zenith during his early experiments with the technology that would become the Red Ultimatrix. The crystal contained laboratory notes, theoretical frameworks, and prototype designs. Most importantly, it contained information about the device's integration process and Zenith's purpose in creating it. The Red Ultimatrix wasn't merely designed to transform its wielder into different species, it was created to evolve them beyond those species' natural limits, ultimately producing what Zenith termed the perfect evolutionary catalyst. According to the data, Zenith believed the universe's natural evolutionary processes were too slow and inefficient. He designed the Red Ultimatrix to accelerate evolution by creating a single being capable of understanding and manipulating the genetic foundations of all life, essentially, a living embodiment of directed evolution. Azimuth had discovered Zenith's work and recognized its immense danger. Evolution guided by a single entity, no matter how well-intentioned, could lead to disastrous unforeseen consequences. He had Zenith exiled and his research allegedly destroyed, but clearly, at least one prototype had survived. As Ben absorbed this information, a secondary security system activated. The temporal energy surrounding the crystal intensified, threatening to sever his connection and possibly damage Phantasma's form in the process. Ben withdrew carefully, processing what he'd learned. The Red Ultimatrix wasn't just a more powerful version of his previous devices, it was fundamentally different in purpose and function. It wasn't designed to temporarily transform him into other species, but to permanently evolve him into something beyond any single species. The implications were staggering. If the integration process completed successfully, he would become something unprecedented, potentially gaining the power to rewrite the evolutionary paths of entire worlds. No wonder the Hunters and the Chronarch were so determined to contain him. A distant alarm pulled Ben from his thoughts. The temporal barrier around the crystal was destabilizing, releasing energy in increasingly violent pulses. Whatever security measure he'd triggered was escalating rapidly. Time to go, Ben decided, gliding toward the exit at maximum speed. He emerged from the structure just as energy began venting from every seam in its construction. The jungle around him wavered as localized time fluctuated wildly, plants growing, withering, and regrowing in seconds, rock faces eroding and reforming in eye blinks. Ben shifted to maximum intangibility, letting the temporal waves pass through his shadowy form. Each wave carried information, fragments of past and potential res bleeding together in chaotic patterns. He caught glimpses of himself in various timelines, triumphant in some, fallen in others, always connected to the Red Ultimatrix in some form. The disturbance CE peaked in a silent explosion that rippled outward in concentric rings. The structure imploded, collapsing into a singularity that vanished with a final pulse of energy. Where it had stood was nothing but undisturbed jungle, as though it had never existed at all. Definitely not standard security measures, Ben remarked, solidifying Phantasma's form once the temporal waves dissipated. He turned to head back to camp, then froze as his enhanced senses detected a presence behind him. He spun, shadow tendrils extending defensively. Kai stood at the jungle's edge, arms crossed, expression unreadable in the darkness. "Interesting new form," she said, voice carefully neutral. "Were you planning to mention it?" Ben shifted back to human form, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing softly as the transformation completed. "I left a message explaining where I was going, which activated when I woke up and found you missing," Kai replied. "Convenient timing, considering whatever just happened." She steered toward where the structure had been. "Care to explain why there's now a localized temporal anomaly where solid ground used to be?" "Security system," Ben said, running a hand through his hair. "I found another of Zenith's outposts, smaller, more like a data storage facility. It had information about the Red Ultimatrix, but when I accessed it, the system self-destructed," Kai finished, sighing, "destroying potentially valuable archaeological evidence in the process." "Sorry about that," Ben offered, genuinely regretful. "I didn't expect it to have a temporal failsafe." Kai's expression softened slightly. "What did you learn that was worth the risk?" Ben hesitated, weighing how much to share. Despite their past, he wasn't certain how Kai would react to the full implications of what he'd discovered. Still, keeping secrets had rarely worked in his favor. "The Red Ultimatrix isn't just a transformation device," he began, choosing his words carefully. "It's designed to evolve its wielder into something Zenith called the perfect evolutionary catalyst, essentially, a being capable of directing the evolution of other species." Kai's eyes widened. "That's significant." "That's one word for it," Ben agreed. "It explains why those hunters and the Chronarch were so determined to contain it. A device that could potentially rewrite the evolutionary path of entire planets. That's a universe-altering power. And it's fused to your wrist," Kai pointed out, glancing at the pulsing crimson device. "How are you feeling? Any changes beyond what you mentioned earlier?" Ben considered the question honestly. "My thought processes are different, more methodical, strategic. I'm processing information faster, making connections I might have missed before. And when I transform," he paused, searching for the right words, "it's like I'm accessing the full potential of each form, not just the basic capabilities." "The apex form," Kai said, recalling what she'd witnessed in the outpost. "Is that available for all your transformations?" "I think so," Ben replied. "But I haven't tested it extensively yet." Kai was silent for a moment, studying him with the careful eye of someone accustomed to evaluating artifacts. "We should get back to camp. Rook was still sleeping when I left, but with that temporal pulse, he's probably awake now and wondering what happened." They made their way through the jungle in companionable silence, Ben occasionally using the Red Ultimatrix's interface to check for additional anomalies. The device seemed to be adapting to his thought patterns, responding more fluidly with each interaction. "You're getting comfortable with it quickly," Kai observed. "Too quickly," Ben admitted. "Part of me is worried about how natural it feels. The other part is already thinking about the tactical advantages it offers. Just remember what Grandpa Max always says. Power isn't just about what you can do, but what you should do," Ben finished with a small smile. "Trust me, that's on constant repeat in my head right now." They reached the camp to find Rook indeed awake, Prototool assembled and scanning the surrounding jungle. His eye and juries had improved significantly thanks to the regenerative bandages Kai had applied. "Ben, Kai," he greeted them, lowering his weapon. "I detected a Class 3 temporal disturbance approximately 1 kilometer north of our position." "Yeah, that was us," Ben confirmed. "Or more accurately, That was a security system I accidentally triggered while investigating another of Zenith's facilities. Rook's expression remained composed, but his tail twitched slightly, a tell Ben had learned to recognize as suppressed concern. Did you obtain useful information before the system activated? Ben summarized what he'd learned about the Red Ultimatrix and its intended purpose. Rook listened attentively, asking occasional clarifying questions that revealed his own familiarity with Galvan evolutionary theory. So this device is not merely an improved Ultimatrix, Rook concluded. It is an evolutionary acceleration matrix designed to create a singular nexus being capable of manipulating genetic code across species. That's exactly right, Ben said, impressed by Rook's precise summary. Though I wouldn't have put it quite so technically. The question remains, Rook continued, whether this power should exist at all. Azimuth clearly believed it should not, hence Zenith's exile. But it does exist, Kai pointed out. And it's bonded to Ben. The practical question now is what to do about it. Before either could respond, the Red Ultimatrix's interface activated spontaneously. A holographic display materialized above Ben's wrist, showing a three-dimensional map of their current location with multiple temporal signatures approaching from various directions. We've got company, Ben warned, already cycling through potential transformations. Looks like our friends from the outpost found us. The temporal pulse may have revealed our location, Rook suggested, prototool configuring for combat. Kai activated her security perimeter, enhancing its power. These barriers won't hold against temporal weapons for long. Then we don't wait for them to attack, Ben decided. He selected an alien form from the interface, one he recognized this time. Time to fight fire with fire. Or in this case, time with clockwork. The transformation was seamless. Clockwork's mechanical body assembling around Ben's consciousness with precision far beyond his previous experiences with the form. Like Diamond Head and Phantasma before, this version was enhanced, sleeker, more efficient, with red energy lines replacing the traditional green. The key-like protrusion on his head gleamed with internal light, and the crimson Ultimatrix symbol pulsed on his chest. Stay within the barrier, Ben instructed, his voice carrying the distinctive mechanical ticking of clockwork. I'll handle this. Ben, wait, Kai began. But he had already stepped through the energy barrier. The jungle beyond the camp perimeter was deathly still, nocturnal creatures silenced by the approaching temporal hunters. Ben extended his consciousness outward, sensing disturbances in the timestream that revealed his enemies' positions. 6 hunters, plus something larger, another Chronarch, likely summoned after he contained the first. I know you're out there, Ben called, key mechanism spinning slowly. Let's talk about this reasonably. A hunter materialized from the darkness, weapon trained on Ben's chest. Yeah, figured as much, Ben replied. But it was worth a shot. The hunter fired its weapon. Ben raised a hand, creating a localized temporal field that slowed the projectile to a near standstill. With his other hand, he generated a counter field that accelerated the hunter's personal timestream, causing its armor to age rapidly, circuits degrading in seconds. The disabled hunter collapsed, but 5 more emerged from different positions, firing simultaneously. Ben created a temporal bubble around himself, accelerating his own time relative to his surroundings. From his perspective, the hunters moved in slow motion, their attacks easily avoided. Moving with mechanical precision, Ben dispatched 3 more hunters using varied temporal techniques. Aging one's weapon to dust, phasing another partially out of sync with normal time, trapping the third in a loop of its own final 3 seconds of motion. The remaining hunters retreated to defensive positions as the Chronarch emerged from the jungle's edge. Unlike the one from the outpost, this Chronarch appeared more evolved, its form more cohesive and purposeful. It intoned, voice rippling through multiple timestreams simultaneously. SSSSSSS. That's a bit dramatic, Ben replied. Key mechanism spinning faster as he gathered power. I just got this thing. I'm not threatening anything. S94.7% SSGSSSS. The Chronarch responded. SS. And the other 5.3%. Ben asked, buying time as he formulated a strategy. The Chronarch paused, temporal readouts fluctuating. So there's a chance things work out fine, Ben pressed. You're willing to count A and me whatever that means, based on probability. S. The Chronarch stated with finality. G. It raised both arms, creating a temporal field that encompassed the entire clearing. Unlike the Hunter's localized attacks, this was a massive distortion that began compressing space-time around Ben, Rook, and Kai, attempting to isolate their section of reality for extraction. Ben felt the pressure building as normal time flow warped around them. Even Clockwork's temporal manipulation abilities were being overwhelmed by the Chronarch's power. He needed something more, a higher level of control. Without conscious decision, his hand moved to the Crimson Ultimatrix symbol on his chest. Apex evolution activated. Clockwork's mechanical body restructured, components shifting and multiplying. His form grew larger, more angular, with additional temporal mechanisms integrated into his limbs and torso. The key mechanism on his head split into 3 interconnected structures that rotated in complex patterns. Red energy coursed through his body, connecting to the environment itself. Apex Clockwork, Ben announced, voice res. Nodding across multiple temporal frequencies simultaneously. The Chronarch paused its attack, temporal readouts spinning frantically as it reassessed the threat. The remaining hunters retreated further, weapons lowering slightly in apparent uncertainty. Ben didn't wait for them to recover. He extended both hands, generating counter fields that matched the Chronarch's compression wave frequency but opposed its phase. The 2 temporal manipulations collided, creating a cascade of chronal energy that illuminated the jungle in impossible colors. You want to talk probability? Ben called, advancing steadily as he maintained the counter field. Let's discuss the likelihood of you succeeding against me with this form. The Chronarch intensified its attack, drawing power from multiple points in time simultaneously. Ben matched it, accessing abilities he somehow knew this form possessed without ever having used them. He could feel time itself responding to his will, bending and flowing around him like water around a stone. With precise calculation, Ben shifted his counter field's frequency by exactly 7.3 temporal units, creating a resonance cascade that disrupted the Chronarch's control. The compression wave collapsed, energy rebounding toward its creator. The Chronarch staggered, portions of its form destabilizing. It attempted to compensate by drawing more power, but Ben anticipated this move. He generated a localized temporal loop around the Chronarch, isolating it from its power sources. It's over, Ben declared, mechanical hands maintaining the containment field. Call off your hunters and leave. I have no quarrel with the collective. The Chronarch's form rippled as it fought against the containment. SSGXS. Maybe not, Ben acknowledged, but I understand choice, and I choose to use this power responsibly, whatever it becomes. The Chronarch's temporal readouts slowed their frantic spinning, settling into a steady rhythm. It regarded Ben with what might have been consideration. It stated cryptically. SSSS. With those words, the Chronarch generated a temporal implosion that collapsed its own containment field. The resulting energy surge temporarily blinded everyone present. When vision returned, the Chronarch and Remainen G-Hunters had vanished. Not retreated through the jungle, but removed themselves from this timestream entirely. Ben deactivated the Apex mode, returning to standard Clockwork form before transforming back to human. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed warmly against his skin, as though pleased with his performance. Kai and Rook emerged from the camp perimeter, both looking impressed despite their concern. That, Kai said, was not standard Chronosapian ability. Definitely not, Ben agreed, examining the Red Ultimatrix thoughtfully. The Apex forms are something else entirely. Rook's proto-tool beeped suddenly, indicating an incoming transmission. Communications have been restored, he reported, activating the receiver. Static crackled before resolving into a familiar voice. Repeat, Mag. Ister Tennyson to Rook Blanco and Ben Tennyson. Do you copy? Grandpa. Ben exclaimed as Rook acknowledged the transmission. Ben. Thank goodness, Max Tennyson's relieved voice came through clearly. We lost contact with your sector 12 hours ago. Plummer sensors detected massive temporal anomalies in your vicinity. What's your situation? Ben exchanged glances with Rook and Kai, then looked down at the crimson device on his wrist. It's complicated, Grandpa. We've encountered something new, something that might change everything. I'm sending a transport to your coordinates, Max replied, concern evident in his voice. ETA 30 minutes. Can you hold position safely? I think so, Ben said, monitoring the Red Ultimatrix's readouts. The immediate threat has withdrawn. Good. Max out. As the transmission ended, Ben met Kai's worried gaze. So, she said quietly, what exactly are you going to tell him about that? She nodded toward the Red Ultimatrix. Ben considered the question carefully. The device was already changing him, his thought processes, his capabilities, perhaps even his fundamental nature. The Chronarch's warning echoed in his mind, along with the KN. Knowledge he'd gathered about Zenith's ambitions. The truth, he decided finally. That I've found something powerful, potentially dangerous, and definitely unprecedented. That I need help understanding it before the integration progresses further. And if Azimuth wants to remove it? Rook asked, the practical question hanging heavily in the air. Ben looked down at the Red Ultimatrix, feeling its subtle presence in his mind. Not controlling, but connecting, expanding his awareness in ways both exhilarating and terrifying. I don't know if that's even possible anymore, he admitted. But I do know this, whatever Zenith designed this device to do, whatever the Chronarch collective fears it might become, the outcome depends on the wielder, not just the tool. Kai placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. And if anyone can handle that responsibility, it's you. That remains to be seen, Ben replied, honesty replacing his usual confidence. But I intend to try. As dawn broke over the jungle, painting the sky in colors that seemed somehow more vivid than before, Ben Tennyson stood at the threshold of something unprecedented. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist, a crimson heartbeat of possibility and danger intertwined. Whatever came next, whatever he might become, would reshape not just his future, but potentially the future of evolution itself. The journey had only just begun. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Evolutionary Paradigm. Plumber headquarters hummed with the controlled chaos of a Level 3 alert. Holographic displays flickered across the comm and center as technicians processed data from 17 planetary systems. 3 days had passed since Ben's encounter with the Chronarch Collective, and the ripple effects were spreading across the galaxy. Ben stood before the central briefing table, the Red Ultimatrix casting crimson reflections on the polished surface. Grandpa Max and Magister Patellidae flanked him, their expressions grave as they reviewed the security footage from the jungle outpost. Pause there, Max instructed, pointing to the image of Ben's apex diamond head form. Enhance Sector 4. The hologram zoomed in, revealing intricate energy patterns flowing across the crystalline body, configurations unlike anything previously documented in Petrosapian physiology. Absolutely unprecedented, Patellidae remarked, adjusting his spectacles. That's not just an evolution, it's a complete reimagining of the species' structural matrix. Ben flexed his fingers unconsciously, remembering the sensation of power that had coursed through that form. It felt natural, like accessing abilities that were always there but locked away. Max studied his grandson carefully. The past 3 days had brought subtle but noticeable changes to Ben. He stood straighter, spoke more precisely, and observed his surroundings with calculating awareness that reminded Max uncomfortably of Azimuth at his most clinical. Any word from Azimuth? Ben asked, reading his grandfather's concern. Nothing direct, Max replied. But Mayax confirmed he received our data packet and is, quote, disturbed by its implications. Typical, Ben muttered. A universe-altering device fuses to my wrist, and he's too busy to make a house call. He's not the only one concerned, Max said carefully. Plumber High Command has questions about the Red Ultimatrix that I can't answer. They're requesting you submit to comprehensive testing at the Galvan Science Institute. Ben's expression remained neutral, but the Red Ultimatrix pulsed once, its glow intensifying momentarily. And if I decline? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications neither man wanted to address directly. Before Max could formulate a response, the command center doors slid open. Magister Tennyson, a young plumber cadet called from the entrance. We've detected another breach at the Technodrome facility on Tyrannus IV. Same signature as the previous incidents. Max's attention shifted immediately to the operational crisis. Put it on the main screen. The display changed to show real-time footage from a research facility under attack. Automated. Security systems discharged energy weapons at shadowy figures moving too quickly for the cameras to capture clearly. Whatever the intruders were, they dismantled complex technology with surgical precision, avoiding lethal force against facility personnel. That's the fourth hit this month, Patelade noted. Always high-security facilities, always specific technology targets. No casualties, minimal collateral damage. Ben studied the footage intently, eyes tracking patterns invisible to others. They're not random targets. There's a technology profile connecting them. Both older plumbers turned to him in surprise. What kind of profile? Max asked. Ben approached the display, manipulating the hologram to highlight specific components the intruders were targeting. Dimensional phase oscillators, quantum entanglement matrices, chronometric accelerators. His fingers danced across the interface, correlating data from previous thefts. They're collecting components for a dimensional gateway system. Patelade blinked in astonishment. How did you determine that so quickly? Our analysts have been working on this pattern for weeks. Ben paused, suddenly aware of how naturally the analysis had come to him. I just saw the connections. Max and Patelade exchanged concerned glances. The Red Ultimatrix, Max said quietly. It's enhancing your cognitive functions, isn't it? Ben nodded slowly. My thought processes are different, more structured. I'm seeing patterns I might have missed before. That's consistent with what Kai's translations suggested about the integration process, Max acknowledged. The question is how far it's progressed and what other changes are occurring. I can help answer that, a new voice announced from the doorway. All 3T. Earned to see a woman in a laboratory coat standing at the entrance, datapad in hand. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing sharp features and intelligent eyes that immediately focused on Ben. Dr. Validus. Max greeted her with formal courtesy. I didn't expect your analysis so soon. I expedited it, Elena Validus replied, approaching the briefing table. At 25, she had established herself as one of the plumbers, leading experts in xenotechnology despite her complicated history with the organization. Ben's biometric readings are too fascinating to postpone examination. Her gaze met Ben's, professional interest mingling with something more complex. They hadn't worked together since the nanochip incident 3 years earlier, when Ben had helped her gain control of the microscopic technology bonded to her system. Elena, Ben acknowledged with a nod that carried unspoken history. Didn't realize you were consulting on this. I'm the foremost expert on biotechnological integration. She replied with a hint of pride. Who better to analyze what's happening to you? Max gestured toward a secure conference room adjacent to the command center. Let's continue this privately. Patelade, coordinate the response to the Tyrannus situation. On it, Max, Patelade confirmed, already issuing commands to the response team. The conference room. door sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss. Elena immediately activated the holoprojector, displaying three-dimensional renderings of Ben's physiological scans. These were taken 6 hours after your encounter with the Red Ultimatrix. She explained, highlighting neural pathways that glowed with unusual activity. And these were taken this morning. The comparison was striking. Neural connections had multiplied exponentially, forming complex networks that extended beyond normal human parameters. Cellular structures throughout Ben's body showed subtle but significant modifications at the molecular level. You're being rewritten from the inside out, Elena stated, clinical detachment failing to mask her fascination. The device isn't just sitting on your wrist, it's integrating with your entire biological system. Is it dangerous? Max asked, concern evident in his voice. Elena's fingers manipulated the display, zooming in on specific cellular structures. Not in the conventional sense. There's no tissue degradation, no immune response, no signs of rejection. In fact, his systems are functioning at unprecedented efficiency. Enhanced cellular regeneration, optimized neural transmission, improved metabolic processes. So it's improving me? Ben asked. Transforming would be more accurate, Elena corrected. It's not making you a better human, it's making you something beyond human. The statement hung in the air, its implications unsettling all present. Can it be removed? Max inquired. Elena shook her head. Not without significant risk. The integration has progressed too far. The device's nanotechnology has established connections throughout his nervous system. Attempting removal now could cause catastrophic neural damage. Ben absorbed this information with surprising calm. Part of him had known from the moment the crimson substance flowed up his arm that there would be no going back. So I'm stuck with it, he concluded. The question is what I do with it now. Max studied his grandson with a mixture of pride and worry. What do you want to do, Ben? Ben turned his attention to the footage from Tyrannus IV, still visible on a secondary display. I want to investigate these technology thefts. The components they're taking, they're similar to systems I saw in Zenith's outpost. There might be a connection. It's a solid lead, Max acknowledged. But I can't send you in officially. High Command is still debating your operational status given the uncertainties around the Red Ultimatrix. I don't need official sanction, Ben replied with a hint of his old confidence. Just transport to Tyrannus IV. I'll go with him, Elena interjected unexpectedly. When both Tennysons looked at her in surprise, she continued, as his medical consultant. Someone needs to monitor the device's effects, especially during stressful situations like combat. Max considered this proposal, weighing operational necessities against potential risks. Unofficial investigation only, he finally decided. Reconnaissance and information gathering. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Understood, Ben agreed, though the Red Ultimatrix pulsed once as if registering disagreement. I'll arrange transport, Max said, moving toward the door. Departure in 60 minutes. And Ben, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Stay in contact. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, I want to know immediately. After Max departed, Ben and Elena stood in awkward silence, years of complicated history between them. She had been an ally, an enemy, a victim. And now something undefined, a brilliant scientist with her own biological enhancements studying his unprecedented transformation. So, Ben finally broke the silence. How are the nanochips? Elena's expression softened slightly, stable, controlled. Thanks in part to your help 3 years ago. She extended her hand, allowing microscopic machines to form a complex pattern across her palm before reabsorbing them. We've reached an understanding, the nanites and I. Sounds familiar, Ben remarked, glancing at the Red Ultimatrix. That's why I volunteered, Elena admitted. Few people understand what it's like to share your body with alien technology. To feel it changing you, becoming part of you. Her dark eyes met his directly. I thought you might appreciate having someone around who gets it. The tension between them eased slightly, replaced by cautious camaraderie. I appreciate that, Ben acknowledged. This whole situation is difficult to explain to others. Even Rook, Elena asked, gathering her equipment. Even him, Ben confirmed. He's trying to understand, but he sees everything through a plumber protocol lens. This is beyond protocol. Where is your furry shadow anyway? Elena inquired as they exited the conference room. Escort duty for the Galvan Diplomatic Corps, Ben explained. Convenient timing, isn't it? Almost like Grandpa wants to keep him away from whatever's happening with me. Max is protective, Elena observed. Of everyone. They made their way through headquarters toward the hangar bay, drawing curious glances from plumbers they passed. Word of Ben's transformation had spread quickly through the organization, spawning rumors that ranged from concerning to absurd. In the hangar, a sleek scout ship awaited them. Small enough to avoid attention but equipped with advanced stealth and scanning technology. It bore no official plumber markings, supporting the unofficial nature of their mission. Max stood by the boarding ramp, performing final pre-flight checks. The ship's AI is programmed with all available data on the theft patterns, he informed them. You'll be dropped at a commercial spaceport 20 kilometers from the Technodrome facility. Local authorities haven't been notified of your arrival. Deniability, Ben noted with a wry smile. In case things go sideways. Protection, Max corrected firmly. For both of you. Whatever connection exists between these thefts and the Red Ultimatrix, I want you to have operational flexibility without political complications. Elena boarded the ship to stow her equipment, leaving the Tennysons a moment of privacy. Ben, Max said quietly, I know that device is changing how you think, but remember who you are at your core. Your heart has always been your greatest strength. Don't let enhanced cognition override that. Ben placed a hand on his grandfather's shoulder. I'm still me, Grandpa. Just processing things differently. I hope so, Max replied. Because the galaxy needs Ben Tennyson, not whatever Zenith was trying to create. With those parting words, Max stepped back as the boarding ramp retracted. Ben took the pilot's seat, hands moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. The ship hummed to life, repulsors lifting it gently from the hangar floor before accelerating into the upper atmosphere. Elena watched from the co-pilot's chair as Ben navigated with uncharacteristic precision. Your piloting has improved, she observed. The Red Ultimatrix helps me process spatial relationships more efficiently, Ben explained, executing a maneuver that would have been beyond his capabilities days earlier. I'm seeing flight paths as mathematical probabilities rather than just steering by instinct. Fascinating, Elena murmured, activating a discrete scanner to record his neural patterns during the task. Are you aware of these cognitive enhancements as they occur? Sometimes, Ben replied, programming the autopilot for the jump to hyperspace. It's like having knowledge I didn't realize I possessed until I need it. Other times, I find myself thinking in ways that feel foreign, considering variables ND consequences I might have overlooked before. Your grandfather's worried you're losing yourself, Elena noted, studying the data from her scanner. Are you? Ben considered the question honestly. I don't think so. My core values haven't changed. I still want to help people, protect the innocent, stop the bad guys. I'm just approaching those goals more strategically. The ship entered hyperspace with a flash of light, stars stretching into luminous streaks around them. With several hours before their arrival at Tyrannus IV, Ben activated the ship's database to review information about the targeted facility. The Technodrome specializes in dimensional research, he noted, scanning through security protocols and facility layouts with remarkable speed. They've recently made breakthroughs in stable gateway generation between parallel realities, which would explain why they're being targeted if someone's building a dimensional transport system, Elena concurred, joining him at the data terminal. The question is who and why. Ben's fingers manipulated the holographic interface, correlating data from previous theft incidents. There's something familiar about the pattern, he murmured, almost to himself. The precision, the non-lethal approach, the specific technologies targeted. You have a theory, Elena prompted. Maybe, Ben replied, though uncertainty tinged his voice. But it doesn't quite fit with what we know about the primary suspects. They spent the remainder of the journey analyzing data and preparing for their arrival. Elena periodically conducted scans of Ben's physiological responses, noting subtle changes in neural activity as he processed complex information. The Red Ultimatrix remained quiet but present, its crimson glow steady against his skin. Tyrannus IV emerged from hyperspace as a gleaming blue-green world, its upper atmosphere streaked with purple auroras generated by the planet's unusual magnetic field. Their ship descended rough cloud layers toward a sprawling spaceport on the southern continent, artificial structures blending harmoniously with the native flora. Impressive environmental integration, Elena remarked as they approached the landing zone. The Turanians are known for their bio-adaptive architecture, and their strict technology export controls, Ben added, transmitting their falsified credentials to Port Authority. Which makes these thefts even more significant. Breaching Turanian security is supposed to be nearly impossible. They docked without incident, their cover identities, technology cons. Ultants responding to the recent security breach, accepted without question. A sleek ground transport awaited them, its systems interfacing smoothly with Ben's authorization codes. The Technodrome is 40 minutes from here, Ben noted as they departed the spaceport. Initial reports indicate the intruders escaped with key components from their phase synchronization laboratory. Elena adjusted her equipment in the passenger seat. Are we planning to announce our presence or observe covertly? Both, potentially, Ben replied, piloting the vehicle along elevated roadways that curved through forests of towering purple-leaved trees. You'll make official contact as the technology consultant. I'll use the Red Ultimatrix to investigate less accessible areas. You mean you'll sneak in while I distract them? Elena translated with a slight smirk. Some things never change, Tennyson. The Technodrome appeared on the horizon, a massive structure of interconnected spheres suspended above a natural basin. Energy fields shimmered around its perimeter, the aftereffects of recently triggered security protocols still visible in the atmosphere. As they approached the primary checkpoint, Lena activated her professional persona with practiced ease. Her credentials were scrutinized thoroughly before they were escorted to the facility's security center, where a harried Turanian official greeted them. Dr. Validus, we weren't expecting the Galactic Science Consortium to respond so quickly, the facility director said, her translucent skin reflecting anxiety. The intrusion occurred only 14 hours ago. The consortium is concerned about the pattern these thefts represent, Elena replied smoothly. My team is prepared to begin analysis immediately. The director's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a Turanian expression of confusion. Team, our records indicate you arrived with only 1 assistant. Elena gestured toward Ben, who stood examining security monitors with apparent disinterest. Mr. Kirby is quite sufficient. If we could see the affected laboratory. While Elena engaged the director in technical discussion, Ben covertly studied the security feeds. His enhanced perception identified subtle anomalies in the footage, microsecond distortions that suggested the intruders had employed some form of temporal manipulation to avoid detection. Dr. Validus, he interrupted quietly. I should prepare our specialized scanning equipment. Perhaps I could return to the vehicle while you continue your preliminary assessment. Elena nodded, understanding the subtext. Excellent suggestion, Mr. Kirby. Please ensure the quantum resonance detector is properly calibrated. With that plausible excuse, Ben exited the security center and made his way to a service corridor. Once alone, he activated the Red Ultimatrix, cycling through available transformations until he found what he needed. Ghost Freak should work, he murmured, pressing down on the crimson symbol. The transformation occurred with unsettling silence, no flash of light, no sensation of physical change. One moment Ben stood in the corridor, the next he hovered as Ghost Freak, though not the version he remembered. This form was more defined, its spectral body wrapped in darkness deeper than mere absence of light. Red energy lines traced eldritch patterns across its surface, and the single eye glowed crimson rather than purple. Interesting modifications, Ben observed, his voice an ethereal whisper that seemed to emanate from multiple locations simultaneously. He phased through the nearest wall, entering the facility's restricted sections with ease. Unlike his previous experiences with this form, Ben maintained complete conscious control, experiencing none of the unsettling personality bleed through that had characterized his earlier transformations into an ectonorite. Moving unseen through the facility, Ben accessed secured laboratories and data centers, absorbing information at an accelerated rate. The Red Ultimatrix seemed to enhance his ability to process and retain data, allowing him to assimilate complex scientific concepts almost instantly. In the primary dimensional R.E. laboratory, still sealed by authorities investigating the theft, Ben discovered subtle evidence overlooked by the facility's security team. Trace energy signatures lingering in supposedly empty sections of the room. Microscopic tool marks on adjacent equipment not included in inventory reports. Most tellingly, a series of quantum calculations displayed on a tertiary monitor, apparently access said by the intruders but not reported in the official breach assessment. They weren't just stealing components, Ben realized. They were verifying mathematical models. He documented his findings, using Ghost Freak's unique sensory capabilities, storing the information within the Red Ultimatrix's expanded memory system. As he prepared to depart, a sudden energy surge from a nearby laboratory caught his attention. Phasing through several walls, Ben entered a testing chamber where technicians monitored what appeared to be a miniature dimensional portal, unstable and fluctuating, but definitely active. The technology looked remarkably similar to systems he had glimpsed in Zenith's outpost. Before he could investigate further, alarms blared throughout the facility. Not security alerts responding to his presence, but emergency warnings indicating an external threat. The testing chamber's monitors shifted to exterior cameras, showing multiple breach points around the technodrome's perimeter. The intruders had returned. Ben phased back through the facility at maximum speed, reaching the security center where Elena was reviewing footage with the increasingly distressed director. Same approach vectors as before, the director was saying, but our enhanced security protocols should have. They're not here for more components, Elena interrupted, studying energy readings with professional focus. They're tracking a unique signature within your facility. Ben materialized in a shadowed corner, reverting to human form without anyone noticing his arrival. He approached Elena from behind, speaking quietly enough that only she could hear. "They're tracking the Red Ultimatrix." Elena's eyes widened slightly, the only indication of her surprise. To the director, she maintained perfect composure. "We need to evacuate non-essential personnel immediately. This intrusion may be more dangerous than the previous one. Our security teams," the director began, "cannot handle this threat," Elena finished firmly. "Trust my expertise, Director. Clear the facility." Something in her tone, perhaps enhanced by subtle nanite manipulation of her vocal patterns, convinced the Turanian. She initiated emergency protocols, sending evacuation orders throughout the Technodrome. As personnel rushed to designated safety zones, Ben and Elena moved in the opposite direction, toward the nearest breach point. "What did you find?" Elena asked, retrieving specialized equipment from her bag, devices that looked suspiciously more combat-oriented than scientific. "Whoever broke in before wasn't just stealing technology," Ben explained, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing subtly on his wrist. "They were confirming theoretical models for stable dimensional transport. And based on the components they've accumulated from previous thefts, they're building something big. And now they're after you," Elena concluded. "Or more specifically, the Red Ultimatrix." Which raises an interesting question, Ben noted as they reached an exterior access point. How did they know it was here? The answer became apparent as they emerged onto a maintenance platform overlooking one of the breach sites. Below them, sleek figures in form-fitting armor moved with mechanical precision, disabling security systems without apparent effort. Unlike the time hunters Ben had encountered in the jungle, these intruders were clearly robotic, humanoid in general shape but with articulation and capabilities beyond organic limitations. Most significantly, each bore a familiar symbol etched into their chest plate. S. A stylized Z, intersecting with a double helix. "Zenith," Ben breathed, recognition immediate despite never having seen the symbol before. "These are his automated systems." "Automated and evolving," Elena observed, her enhanced vision detecting subtle variations in the robot's design. "Their construction incorporates self-modifying components. They're learning, adapting with each incursion." One of the robots paused, head tilting as its sensors detected their presence. It raised an arm, palm extending to reveal an embedded scanning device that swept the platform where they stood. It announced in a voice uncannily similar to the Time Hunter's temporal speech, "XSG, S." The robot launched itself toward them with impossible speed, traversing the 30-meter vertical distance in seconds. 3 more followed immediately, converging on their position from different angles. "So much for observation only," Ben remarked, activating the Red Ultimatrix. "Time to test another new form." He selected an unfamiliar silhouette from the holographic interface, a live, mechanical-looking alien labeled in Galvan script that translated in his mind as mechanoid. The transformation was instantaneous, his body reconfiguring into a humanoid form composed of interlocking metallic components with red energy flowing through visible circuitry. "Interesting choice," Elena commented, nanites forming protective armor around her body as she prepared for combat. "Let's see what it can do," Ben replied, his voice carrying metallic harmonics. The first robot reached their position, mechanical limbs reconfiguring into weapons that discharged energy pulses. Ben raised a hand instinctively, and his mechanoid form responded by generating a deflection field that absorbed the attack completely. More surprising was what happened next. The absorbed energy flowed through his circuitry, analyzed and reverse-engineered in microseconds. Ben suddenly understood the weapon's operating principles, its vulnerabilities, its potential modifications. Technopathy, he realized aloud. This form can interface with an analyzed technology. Extending both hands, Ben established a connection with the attacking robot. Its systems fought his intrusion initially, security protocols activating countermeasures that would have overwhelmed ordinary hacking attempts. But the mechanoid form adapted instantly, bypassing defenses and penetrating core programming. "Let's see what you know," Ben murmured, downloading data directly from the robot's memory core. The information flood was overwhelming. Schematics, coordinates, mission parameters, evolutionary algorithms too complex to process immediately. Before Ben could complete the data extraction, the robot initiated an emergency defense protocol, overloading its own systems rather than allowing further access. The remaining robots adjusted their approach, apparently communicating Ben's capabilities to each other. Rather than engaging directly, they deployed countermeasures, localized EMP bursts, signal jamming fields, and most concerning, a device that generated D-dimensional distortions around Ben's position. "They're trying to force you to disengage," Elena observed, her nanites forming offensive configurations to intercept two robots approaching from below. "Or test my capabilities," Ben countered, adapting his mechanoid form to resist the technological attacks. "The data I glimpsed. They're following protocols established by Zenith to evaluate the Red Ultimatrix's development." "Evaluation through combat," Elena noted, launching a swarm of nanites that enveloped one robot in a metallic cocoon. "Efficient if somewhat unethical." Ben extended his awareness through the Technodrome's systems, establishing control over security countermeasures that the robots had disabled. With a thought, he reactivated defensive barriers, containment fields, and automated responses, all targeted specifically at the intruders. The robots found themselves suddenly fighting on multiple fronts as the facility's defenses turned against them. Two were captured in stasis fields, another disabled by precision energy weapons that targeted specific vulnerabilities. But the lead robot, the one that had first detected them, proved more adaptable. It interfaced with the dimensional testing laboratory, overriding safety protocols to activate the experimental portal system. Energy readings spiked dangerously as the unstable gateway expanded beyond containment parameters. "It's creating a dimensional breach," Elena warned, her scanners detecting the growing distortion. "If that expands to critical mass, the entire facility could be pulled into a pocket dimension," Ben finished. "Already moving toward the laboratory. I need to shut it down." Elena engaged the remaining robots, her nanites forming increasingly complex offensive patterns. "Go. I'll handle these." Ben's mechanoid form allowed him to interface directly with the Technodrome's transportation systems, rerouting a gravity lift to carry him to the laboratory in seconds. The dimensional gateway had grown to fill half the chamber, its edges fluctuating wildly as reality itself warped around the unstable aperture. The lead robot stood before a control console, mechanical fingers manipulating controls with precision that suggested intimate familiarity with the technology. It turned as Ben entered, optical sensors focusing on the Red Ultimatrix symbol visible on his chest. "SG, it stated, voice carrying unexpected inflection. "SSS. You're not just collecting technology," Ben realized, the mechanoid forms. Enhanced processing helping him connect disparate facts. "You're preparing for the next stage of integration." The robot confirmed. "SSGSGSS. The dimensional gateway pulsed, expanding another meter. Alarms shrieked as containment systems failed in sequence. "Shut it down," Ben commanded, stepping forward. "This facility isn't equipped for controlled dimensional breaching." The robot corrected. With that cryptic statement, the robot activated a final sequence. The gateway stabilized momentarily, its chaotic energies resolving into a defined portal. Through the aperture, Ben glimpsed what appeared to be an enormous laboratory, far more advanced than the Technodrome. With equipment arranged around a central platform that looked disturbingly similar to the one where he had discovered the Red Ultimatrix. Zenith's primary facility, Ben realized. Recreating a direct route to his laboratory. "SSS, the robot stated, gesturing toward the portal. "XS. And if I decline the invitation?" Ben asked, subtly interfacing with the laboratory's systems to prepare countermeasures. The robot tilted its head in a disturbingly organic gesture. "XS. That statement gave Ben pause. If coercion wasn't authorized, it suggested the integration process couldn't be forced, that his own choices would determine the ultimate outcome of whatever Zenith had set in motion. Before he could respond, Elena burst into the laboratory, nanites swirling around her in combat configuration. Her eyes widened at the sight of the stabilized portal. "Ben, we need to close that gateway immediately," she warned. "The energy readings are off the charts." The robot turned toward Elena, sensors analyzing her nanite-enhanced form. SSSSSSS. Its attention diverted, Ben seized the opportunity. He fully integrated with the laboratory's systems, ISO, letting the power source sustaining the portal. With precise control, he initiated a cascading shutdown sequence designed to safely collapse the dimensional aperture. The robot detected his interference immediately. It never finished the statement. Elena launched a precision nanite attack that severed the robot's connection to the control console. Simultaneously, Ben completed the shutdown sequence, causing the portal to contract rapidly. The robot made a final decision, abandoning its mission parameters to preserve the data it had collected. It launched itself toward the collapsing portal, passing through the aperture moments before it closed completely. Silence fell over the laboratory as emergency systems reset themselves. Ben disengaged from the facility's network, maintaining his mechanoid form as he processed what had occurred. "You all right?" Elena asked, approaching cautiously. Ben nodded, his mechanical features reconfiguring to approximate a thoughtful expression. "They weren't trying to capture me or the Red Ultimatrix. They were inviting me to Zenith's facility for the next phase of integration. Suggesting T's integration process has predetermined stages," Elena noted, her scientific curiosity evident despite the recent danger. "Did you learn anything about what those stages entail?" "Fragments," Ben replied, accessing the data he'd extracted from the robot's systems. "The first stage was physical bonding, when the device attached itself to my wrist. The second stage is cognitive enhancement, which is apparently progressing within acceptable parameters. And the next stage," Ben's mechanical features shifted into a frown. "That's where it gets concerning." The robot mentioned evolutionary ascension, requiring specialized facilities. Quote, Elena considered this information, nanites settling back into her bloodstream as the immediate threat passed. "We should return to Plumber headquarters. Max needs to hear about this." Ben reverted to human form, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing softly as the transformation completed. "Not yet," he decided. "We have a lead now, a direct connection to Zenith's operations. We should follow it while the trail is fresh." "How?" "The portal's closed," Elena pointed out. "But I know where they've been," Ben replied, accessing the Red Ultimatrix's interface. "The data I extracted includes coordinates for previous technology acquisitions. One location in particular stands out, a research outpost on Galvan Prime's second moon." Elena's eyes widened. "Galvan Prime, Ben, that's the most heavily monitored system in the galaxy. If we show up unannounced, we won't be detected," Ben assured her. "Not with the right approach." He selected a transformation from He interface, the shadowy form labeled Phantasma that he had used during his jungle investigation. The Red Ultimatrix responded instantly, converting his human form into the ethereal alien composed of living darkness. "This form can phase into the ship's systems," Ben explained, his voice an otherworldly whisper. "I can mask our energy signature, making us virtually invisible to Galvan security systems." Elena studied his transformed state with scientific fascination. "That's not a species I'm familiar with. The Red Ultimatrix has access to genetic samples of never encountered before," Ben explained. "Phantasma is one of them, some kind of energy-based life form capable of technological integration similar to your nanites." As if responding to this description, tendrils of shadow extended from Ben's form, interfacing with nearby laboratory equipment. Information flowed through the connection, processed and analyzed in moments. "We should go," Ben decided, withdrawing the tendrils. "The Technodrome's security teams will be here soon, and I'd rather not explain why we engaged the intruders instead of evacuating." They made their way back to their transport vehicle, avoiding the chaos of emergency responders and security personnel converging on the breach sites. Elena drove while Ben maintained his Phantasma form, manipulating the vehicle's identification systems to avoid detection as they departed. Once clear of the Technodrome's security perimeter, Ben reverted to human form. The effort of maintaining the transformation for an extended period left him momentarily disoriented, not from physical exhaustion, but from the mental adjustment of shifting between such different modes of perception. "The cognitive transitions are becoming more pronounced," he noted, massaging his temples. "When I transform now, it's not just my body that changes, my thought processes adapt to each form's natural capabilities." "That's consistent with the integration theory," Elena observed, piloting the vehicle toward the spaceport. "The Red Ultimatrix isn't just giving you access to alien forms, it's optimizing your consciousness to utilize them fully. It's more than that, Ben insisted, struggling to articulate the sensation. It feels like each transformation adds to my understanding when I return to human form. Like I'm accumulating knowledge and perspectives from multiple species simultaneously. Elena glanced at him, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding caution. May I scan you during your next transformation? I'd like to document the neural pattern shifts. Ben nodded his agreement as they reached the spaceport. Their ship awaited, undisturbed in its docking bay. After returning the ground transport, they boarded quickly, eager to depart before any connection could be made between them and the Technodrome incident. As Elena prepared the ship for launch, Ben accessed the coordinates he had extracted from the robot's systems. The location on Galvan Prime's second moon was identified as Auxiliary Research Station 27B, officially listed as decommissioned centuries ago but apparently still active as one of Zenith's hidden facilities. This could be a trap, Elena pointed out as they broke atmosphere. The robot might have allowed you to access those coordinates deliberately. Probably, Ben acknowledged, but it's also our best lead. Whatever Zenith was planning with the Red Ultimatrix, his automated systems are continuing that work. If we want answers about what this device is really designed to do, that outpost is our most promising source. Elena programmed the hyperspace coordinates, her expression troubled. Have you considered that some answers might be better left undiscovered? If Azimuth deemed this technology dangerous enough to exile its creator, it's too late for that kind of caution, Ben replied, raising his wrist to display the Red Ultimatrix pulsing against his skin. This thing is already part of me, already changing me. I need to understand what it's designed to do so I can control the outcome rather than being controlled by it. The ship entered hyperspace, stars streaking into luminous trails around them. The journey to Galvan Prime would take approximately 7 hours, time Ben intended to use productively. I want to test something, he announced, activating the Red Ultimatrix's interface. I need to better understand how different transformations affect my cognitive processes. Elena retrieved her scanning equipment, setting up monitoring devices around the ship's common area. Which form are you planning to use? Ben cycled through available transformations, considering options. Something with enhanced intelligence. Gray matter seems logical, but his finger hovered over an unfamiliar silhouette, a tall, slender alien with an enlarged cranium. The Galvan label translated in his mind as Cerebron. Let's try this one, he decided, selecting the new form. The transformation was smooth and precise. Ben's human form reconfigured into a humanoid alien approximately 7 feet tall with gray-blue skin and an enlarged, ridged cranium. 4 slender arms emerged, each ending in 6-fingered hands capable of incredible dexterity. Most striking were the eyes, solid crimson orbs that seemed to perceive beyond normal visual spectrum. Fascinating, Elena breathed, scan. Nerves recording every aspect of the transformation. This species isn't in any Plumber database I've accessed. Cerebron, Ben stated, his voice now possessing harmonic qualities that suggested multi-PLE speech centers operating simultaneously. A hyper-evolved intellect species from the Andromeda Galaxy's central cluster. The information had come to him naturally, as though retrieved from Perso. Null memory rather than an external database. Ben's consciousness expanded dramatically, cognitive processes accelerating beyond human limitations. Complex mathematical formulas, scientific principles, and technological schematics filled his awareness, instantly comprehensible where they would have been indecipherable to his human mind. Most significantly, his understanding of the Red Ultimatrix itself deepened. The device's internal architecture became clear to him, not just its mechanical components, but the underlying principles of its biotechnological integration systems. The device operates on 17 simultaneous processing layers, Ben explained, 4 hands moving in perfect coordination to create a holographic representation of the Red Ultimatrix's internal structure. The Prima-Rai integration matrix establishes neural connections that persist across transformations, accumulating experiential data from each form. Elena watched in amazement as Ben constructed an increasingly complex model of the device's operations, far beyond anything her own scans had revealed. The integration process isn't merely physical or cognitive, Ben continued, expanding the hologram to show connections between the device and his neural pathways. It's designed to facilitate evolutionary understanding, the ability to comprehend and eventually direct genetic development across species boundaries. That's godlike power, Elena observed, the implications dawning on her with unsettling clarity. The ability to guide evolution itself. Which explains why both the Chronarch Collective and Zenith's systems are so interested in its development, Ben concluded. The Red Ultimatrix isn't just a transformation tool, it's an evolutionary nexus point capable of influencing universal constants. The enormity of this realization would have been overwhelming to his human consciousness, but Cerebrin's hyper-evolved intellect processed it with calm analysis. Ben began constructing theoretical models of the integration's final stages, calculating potential outcomes with mathematical precision. Elena's scanners beeped urgently, detecting unusual energy patterns. Ben, your neural activity is approaching critical thresholds. The transformation is drawing significant power from the Red Ultimatrix. Ben nodded, aware of the energy consumption but unconcerned. Cerebrin's cognitive PA cities require substantial resources to maintain. The Red Ultimatrix is adapting to provide the necessary power. Indeed, the device pulsed with increasing frequency, crimson energy flowing visibly through Ben's transformed body. The ship's systems responded to this energy signature, lights flickering as power fluctuations rippled through the electrical grid. I think you should revert, Elena suggested, concern evident in her voice. The power draw is affecting the ship's systems, and your neural patterns are showing signs of potential dissociation. Ben hesitated, reluctant to surrender. The expanded awareness that Cerebrin's form provided. With this consciousness, he could potentially solve the entire mystery of the Red Ultimatrix in hours rather than days or weeks. But Elena's warning registered as valid. Maintaining this form for too long might accelerate the integration process beyond his ability to control it. With reluctance, he deactivated the transformation, returning to human form. The transition was jarring, like moving from a vast cathedral of thought into a confined room. Yet unlike previous transformations, significant portions of Cerebrin's understanding remained accessible to his human mind. Stored within what felt like newly established neural pathways. That was, he began, searching for words adequate to describe the experience. Dangerous, Elena finished, reviewing the scan data with professional concern. Your brain activity during that transformation exceeded anything I've ever recorded from a sentient being. You were processing information at rates that should be physiologically impossible for any organic system. Ben rubbed his temples, adjusting to the relative limitations of human cognition. But effective. I understand the Red Ultimatrix better now, its purpose, its mechanisms, its potential. And, Elena prompted, setting aside her equipment to focus on his response. It's designed to create something unprecedented, Ben explained, struggling to articulate concepts that had been crystal clear to Cerebrin's consciousness. A nexus being capable of perceiving and influencing evolutionary pathways across all life forms. Not just transforming into different species, but understanding them at their genetic core and guiding their development. A godlike entity, Elena said softly. No wonder Azimuth opposed it. That kind of power shouldn't exist in a single consciousness. It's more nuanced than that, Ben countered, fragments of Cerebrin's understanding informing his perspective. The device doesn't simply grant power, it evolves its wielder into a form capable of exercising that power responsibly. The integration process is designed to develop the wisdom necessary to handle such abilities. According to Zenith's parameters, Elena pointed out, and we have no way of knowing if his understanding of responsible use aligns with yours, or with what's best for the universe. Ben fell silent, considering this valid concern. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed softly against his wrist, its presence a constant reminder of the transformation already underway within him. Their ship continued its journey through hyperspace, the automated systems managing their approach to the Galvan system. Ben spent the remaining hours reviewing what he had learned as Cerebron, making notes and diagrams that would have been incomprehensible to him days earlier. Elena monitored his condition discreetly, tracking subtle changes in his neural patterns even in human form. The integration was progressing faster than her original estimates suggested, accelerated, perhaps, by his use of increasingly complex transformations. As they approached Galvan Prime, Ben activated the ship's cloaking systems, enhancing them with modifications derived from his Cerebron knowledge. The Red Ultimatrix interfaced seamlessly with the technology, extending their stealth capabilities beyond standard specifications. "We'll approach the moon from its dark side," Ben explained, piloting manually as they dropped from hyperspace at a carefully calculated distance from standard arrival coordinates. Galvan detection systems are focused primarily on approaching vectors from established hyperspace lanes. Elena observed his confident handling of complex approach vectors. "Your piloting skills have improved dramatically." The Red Ultimatrix retains spatial calculation abilities from Cerebron's transformation, Ben explained. "I can perceive multidimensional flight paths more clearly now." Their ship slipped past Galvan Prime's extensive security network without triggering alerts, approaching the smaller of the planet's two moons. The surface was barren and cratered, apparently uninhabited, but Ben's enhanced scanning revealed artificial structures hidden beneath the regolith. "There," he indicated, highlighting a section of the moon's surface that appeared identical to surrounding terrain. Holographic camouflage concealing the research station entrance. They landed 2 kilometers from the disguised facility, using a natural crater for additional concealment. After ensuring the ship's systems were in standby mode to minimize detectable emissions, they prepared for surface exploration. "The atmosphere is thin but breathable with supplemental oxygen," Ben noted, examining environmental readings. Temperature drops to -60°C during lunar night, which begins in approximately 3 hours. Elena equipped herself with adaptive armor generated by her nanites, complete with life support and defensive capabilities. "How are we approaching? Stealth or direct?" Ben considered their options, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing softly as he accessed its interface. "Combination approach. I'll use Phantasma to infiltrate their systems and disable security. Then we'll enter together to investigate." The transformation into Phantasma was instantaneous, Ben's form dissolving into living shadow wrapped in crimson energy patterns. He extended a tendril toward Elena, establishing a communication link through her nanite interface. "I'll maintain contact this way," his voice whispered directly into her mind. "Wait for my signal before approaching the facility entrance." With that, Ben's shadowy form flowed across the lunar surface, leaving no footprints in the fine dust. He approached the disguised entrance, passing through the holographic camouflage as though it were mist. The structure beneath was precisely as expected, a reinforced airlock concealing a much larger underground complex. Rather than attempting to bypass the physical security, Phantasma's form dissipated further, becoming thin enough to seep through microscopic gaps in the airlock's construction. Once inside, he reformed partially, extending tendrils to interface with the facility's systems. Unlike the Technodrome's relatively straightforward security, this facility employed Galvan encryption protocols, sophisticated enough to challenge even Phantasma's abilities. Ben concentrated, drawing on remnants of Cerebron's knowledge to identify vulnerabilities in the system architecture. Gradually, he established control over subsystems, careful to avoid triggering alerts that might activate automated defenses. The facility appeared largely automated, with minimal life signs detected, primarily maintenance drones and research systems operating on predetermined protocols. After disabling primary security measures, Ben located the central laboratory and accessed its research logs. What he discovered confirmed his suspicions. This facility was one of several established by Zenith to continue his work after exile. It had remained operational through automated systems programmed to advance specific research objectives related to evolutionary acceleration. Most significantly, the logs contained detailed information about the Red Ultimatrix, including specifications for specialized equipment designed to facilitate what was termed Phase 3 integration, evolutionary awakening. Ben copied the critical data to the Red Ultimatrix's storage systems before establishing a secure path to the facility entrance. He reactivated the airlock's basic functions while keeping security systems offline, then sent the promised signal to Elena. "Entrance secure," his voice whispered through their nanite link. "Facility is automated. No organic life forms detected. Central laboratory contains significant data on the Red Ultimatrix integration process." Elena approached the revealed entrance, her nanite armor adapting to the lunar environment. The airlock cycled smoothly, admitting her to the facility's interior where Ben's shadowy form awaited. Impressive infiltration, she commented as Ben reverted to human form beside her. Quote, your control over that transformation has improved significantly. The Red Ultimatrix seems to optimize each form's capabilities beyond their natural limitations, Ben explained, leading the way toward the central laboratory. Phantasma's phase-shifting abilities are more precise than any transformation I've used before. The corridor they traversed bore unmistakable Galvan design elements, though modified with technology that appeared more advanced than current standards. Maintenance drones skittered along recessed tracks in the walls and ceiling, ignoring the intruders now that security protocols had been suspended. The central laboratory was a vast circular chamber dominated by a platform identical to the one where Ben had discovered the Red Ultimatrix. Surrounding it were diagnostic stations, synthesis chambers, and data terminals, all designed to monitor and facilitate the device's integration process. This is a staging area, Ben realized, examining the central platform. Signed to manage the transition to Phase 3 integration. Elena approached a data terminal, her nanites interfacing with the system to access protected files. According to these records, Zenith E. established 5 such facilities across the galaxy. Each was programmed to activate when a viable Red Ultimatrix bonding occurred. Which explains the technology thefts, Ben concluded. The Automate D systems are gathering components to prepare all 5 facilities for the integration's final phases. Elena's expression grew troubled as she assimilated more information. Ben, these specifications. The process Zenith designed isn't just about granting power. Phase 3 requires a fundamental restructuring of the wielder's genetic code, a complete evolutionary leap beyond baseline humanity. Ben accessed another terminal, reviewing simulation data that confirmed Elena's assessment. The Red Ultimatrix was designed not merely to allow temporary transformations but to ultimately create an A-W life form, one that incorporated optimal genetic elements from multiple species into a singular evolutionary vector. He was trying to create the perfect being, Ben murmured, the implications settling over him with uncomfortable weight. Not just someone who could transform into different aliens, but a new entity that combined the best aspects of all species. With the power to direct the evolutionary course of entire worlds. Elena added, the ultimate expression of Zenith's philosophy that evolution should be guided rather than left to chance. Ben approached the central platform, studying its components with enhanced perception granted by his recent transformations. The design was elegant in its complexity, a system capable of completely rewriting genetic code while preserving consciousness and identity. The question is whether this was designed as an option or an inevitability, he said, turning to Elena. As the Red Ultimatrix programmed to force this transformation, or does the wielder maintain choice throughout the process? Elena reviewed additional files, searching for answers. The integration protocols emphasize symbiotic development. The device learns from the wielder as the wielder learns from it. According to these notes, Zenith believed that only through mutual adaptation could the optimal evolutionary vector be achieved. Suggesting the outcome depends at least partly on my own choices. Ben concluded, finding modest reassurance in this revelation. The Red Ultimatrix influences but doesn't control the integration process. Further exploration of He facility revealed storage chambers containing components identical to those stolen from various research installations, parts clearly intended for the specialized equipment required for Phase 3 integration. One chamber in particular caught their attention, a sealed vault containing what appeared to be a stasis pod. Life support systems active, Elena noted, scanning the vault with her nanites. There's something, or someone, preserved in there. Ben accessed the security protocols, bypassing multiple layers of encryption to unseal the vault. The door retracted with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a cylindrical stasis chamber at the room's center. Inside, suspended in translucent preservation fluid, floated a Galvan, physically similar to Azimuth but with subtle anatomical differences that suggested genetic modification. As that, Elena began. Zenith, Ben confirmed, accessing the stasis pod's monitoring systems. In suspended animation. According to these readings, he's been in stasis for over 500 years. The pod's interface activated at Ben's proximity, specifically responding to the Red Ultimatrix. A holographic projection materialized above the stasis field, Zeni. His consciousness preserved as an interactive program. Red Ultimatrix detected, the hologram stated, studying Ben with intelligent eyes that seemed too aware for a mere recording. Integration progress. Phase 2 nearing completion. Identity of wielder. Benjamin Kirby Tennyson. Unexpected but intriguing. You know who I am? Ben asked, surprised that a centuries-old program would recognize him. My systems have monitored galactic communications since activation, the hologram explained. Your activities with the original Omnitrix and subsequent devices have been thoroughly documented. Your selection as wielder introduces variables not accounted for in original projections. Is that good or bad from your perspective? Ben inquired, wary but curious. The hologram considered this question with apparent thoughtfulness. Uncertain. Your psychological profile differs significantly from anticipated parameters. Your resistance to power's corruption exceeds statistical norms. This may enhance or impede the intended evolutionary outcome. Elena stepped forward, scientific curiosity overcoming caution. Is the integration process reversible at this stage? Technically achievable but inadvisable, the hologram replied. Neural pathways have already established permanent connections. Separation would result in approximately 73.4% probability of catastrophic cognitive fragmentation. Ben processed this information calmly, more calmly than he might have days earlier. What exactly is the intended evolutionary outcome you mentioned? The hologram's expression became animated, displaying genuine passion rare in artificial intelligence. The creation of a being capable of perceiving and directing evolutionary pathways across all life forms. Not a god. Gods lack empirica, understanding, but an evolutionary catalyst capable of optimizing genetic development according to scientifically sound principles. And who determines what optimizing means? Ben challenged. WHO decides which evolutionary paths are preferable. The wielder does, the hologram answered simply. The Red Ultimatrix provides capability, not directive. The evolutionary philosophy applied through its use will reflect the wielder's own understanding and values. This response aligned with what Ben had already suspected. The device enhanced and enabled but didn't control. His choices would ultimately determine how its power was used, assuming he continued with the integration process. Why was Zenith placed in stasis? Elena asked, gesturing toward the suspended Galvan. The hologram's expression shifted to something resembling regret. My physical form reached its evolutionary limits. The Red Ultimatrix was designed for beings with greater genetic plasticity. Galvan physiology proved insufficient for later integration phases. Stasis was implemented to preserve consciousness until a viable alternative could be developed. He intended to transfer his consciousness to whoever successfully bonded with the device. Ben realized the implications chilling despite his enhanced emotional regulation. To experience the evolutionary ascension through them. Incorrect, the hologram countered. Consciousness transfer was considered but rejected. The optimal evolutionary outcome requires the wielder's unique perspective and experiences. Zenith's consciousness remains in stasis, awaiting the successful creation of a form capable of sustaining Galvan cognitive complexity within a more adaptable physiological framework. Before they could ask further questions, alarm system throughout the facility suddenly activated. Screens displayed multiple ships entering orbit around the moon, plumber vessels, accompanied by what appeared to be a Galvan science cruiser. We've been detected, Elena said unnecessarily, her nanites already forming defensive configurations. The hologram observed the developing situation with analytical calm. Plumber response time exceeds projections. Recommend immediate relocation to primary integration facility. Where is that facility? Ben asked, already activating the Red Ultimatrix's interface. Coordinates downloading to Red Ultimatrix system, the hologram confirmed. Temporal displacement recommended to avoid intercept. The stasis pod began powering down, preservation fluid draining as the system prepared for transport. The hologram flickered, then stabilized with renewed clarity. Your arrival presents an opportunity to recover my physical form, it stated. The Phase 3 integration would benefit from direct oversight. Ben considered this request, weighing potential benefits against obvious risks. And if I decline, then my consciousness remains in stasis, and you proceed with integration guided only by automated systems, the hologram replied. Less optimal but still viable. Elena's nanites relayed urgent information from the facility's perimeter sensors. Ben, They're deploying teams. We have maybe 5 minutes before they breach the primary airlock. Decision time. Ben could escape with Elena, leaving Zenith in stasis for the plumbers to secure. He could attempt to transport the stasis pod as requested, potentially gaining valuable guidance for the integration process but also introducing a wildcard into an already complex situation. Or he could surrender to the plumbers, submitting to whatever procedures they deemed appropriate for the unprecedented situation. The red Ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist, neither encouraging nor discouraging any particular choice. The decision would be his alone, the first major test of how he would wield the device's growing influence. We're leaving, Ben decided, selecting clockwork from the transformation menu. Without the stasis pod, I need answers, but I'm not releasing Zenith until I understand the full implications of his work. The hologram's expression registered something between disappointment and respect. A cautious approach. Perhaps validation of your selection as wielder. Alternative coordinates available. Secondary research facility in the Kyludine system. Less optimal but sufficient for continued integration support. Download those coordinates instead, Ben instructed as the transformation overtook him. Clockwork's mechanical body assembled around his consciousness, red energy flowing through its components. The enhanced temporal manipulation abilities of this form would allow them to escape before the plumber teams could reach their position. Elena approached, placing a hand on his metallic shoulder. Are we making the right call here, Ben? Maybe we should talk to your grandfather, explain what we've discovered. Ben considered her suggestion seriously. We will, after we've gathered more information. Right now, they're operating on fear of the unknown. I need concrete answers before I subject myself to whatever procedures they're planning. The hologram flickered one final time. Integration proceeds regardless of location. Phase 3 will initiate within 72 hours as neural pathways complete established connections. Recommend appropriate preparation. With that warning, the projection vanished. As the stasis pod's systems returned to standby mode. External alarms indicated the plumber teams had breached the facility's outer defenses. Hold on, Ben instructed, drawing Elena close as his temporal mechanisms activated. Space-time warped around them, accelerating their personal timestream relative to their surroundings. To external observers, they would appear to vanish instantly, while from their perspective, the world slowed to near immobility. Ben guided them through the facility at superluminal subjective speed, navigating past frozen plumber operatives already entering the outer corridors. They reached their ship in what felt like seconds, though nearly 10 minutes passed in normal time. Once aboard, Ben maintained temporal acceleration while Elena prepared for emergency departure. The ship lifted off before the plumber teams could establish a perimeter, accelerating at maximum thrust toward a calculated hyperspace entry point designed to mask their trajectory. Only when they were safely in hyperspace did Ben revert to human form, the exertion of sustained temporal manipulation leaving him momentarily disoriented. That was intense, he managed, collapsing into the pilot's seat. Maintaining temporal acceleration for that duration takes more concentration than before. Elena studied him with clinical concern, scanners assessing his condition. Your neural pathways are evolving to handle the increased information processing. The red Ultimatrix is adapting your brain to manage more complex transformations. Ben nodded, already aware of the changes occurring within his cognitive structures. The hologram said Phase 3 would initiate within 72 hours. We need to understand what that entails before it happens. The secondary facility should have that information, Elena noted. Setting course for the Kyludine system. But Ben, maybe we should reconsider contacting Max. Whatever's happening to you, facing it alone seems unnecessarily risky. Ben stared at the red Ultimatrix. Its crimson glow pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, or perhaps his heart had synchronized with the device. I'm not sure I trust the plumbers. Response at this point. You saw their approach, armed teams ready to contain a potential threat. They're afraid of what this device represents. With good reason, Elena pointed out. A technology capable of rewriting evolutionary patterns across species. That's unprecedented power, which is exactly why I need to understand it before surrendering to procedures designed to neutralize it, Ben countered. The red Ultimatrix isn't just attached to my wrist anymore. it's integrated with my neural pathways, my cognitive processes, possibly even my fundamental genetic code. Removing it improperly could do more damage than leaving it in place. Elena couldn't argue with that assessment, particularly given the hologram's warning about cognitive fragmentation. Still, her expression revealed lingering concern. We proceed to the Kyludine facility, she conceded, but we establish communication protocols. If Phase 3 integration begins and shows any signs of compromising your autonomy or core identity, we contact Max immediately. Agreed, Ben said, offering his hand to seal the arrangement. As their fingers touched, both noticed something unexpected, a momentary energy transfer between Elena's nanites and the Red Ultimatrix. Information exchanging at speeds too rapid for conscious perception. Did you feel that? Elena asked, drawing back in surprise. Ben nodded, examining the Red Ultimatrix. As its interface activated spontaneously. It seems to be analyzing your nanite structure. Cataloging it somehow. Elena extended her hand again, this time deliberately allowing her nanites to interact with the device's energy field. Data flowed between the two systems, complex algorithms exchanging information about their respective integration methods. Fascinating, she breathed, scientify. See curiosity temporarily overriding caution. Your device and my nanites are compatible technologies, different applications of similar principles regarding biotechnological integration. Zenith must have been familiar with nanite theory. Ben speculated, perhaps even incorporated elements of it into the Red Ultimatrix design. The information exchange completed, both systems returning to normal operation. But something had changed, a connection established that neither fully understood yet. Their ship continued through hyperspace, leaving Galvan Prime and its pursuing plumbers far behind. The Kyludine system lay 12 hours away at maximum speed, time Ben intended to use understanding the implications of what they had discovered. We should rest in shifts, he suggested, noting Elena's evident fatigue despite her nanite-enhanced endurance. The past 24 hours have been demanding. Elena nodded agreement, setting automatic alerts before retiring to the ship's small rest chamber. Ben remained in the pilot's seat, ostensibly monitoring their course but actually deep in thought, processing everything they had learned. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed steadily against his skin, its presence now so familiar he barely noticed it consciously. Yet he was acutely aware of the changes it had wrought already: enhanced cognition, accelerated information processing, intuitive understanding of complex systems that would have bewildered him before. More concerning were the changes he could feel developing beneath conscious awareness. Neural pathways reorganizing, cognitive structures evolving, perspective shifting in subtle but fundamental ways. He remained Ben Tennyson in core identity and values, yet his understanding of himself and his place in the universe was transforming with each passing hour. The hologram's warning echoed in his thoughts. Phase 3 would initiate within 72 hours regardless of location or circumstance. Whatever evolutionary leap Zenith had designed the Red Ultimatrix to facilitate, Ben would soon experience it firsthand. The question that remained, the question that had haunted him since the device first bonded to his wrist, was whether he would emerge from that transformation still recognizably himself, or become something else entirely. Something beyond human, beyond alien, beyond anything the universe had seen before. Only time would tell, and time, it seemed, was running inexorably short. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Temporal Dissonance. The Kyludine system hung like a forgotten ornament at the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy, three pale stars orbiting each other in a complex gravitational dance, their combined light barely illuminating the scattered planetoids that drifted in their shared influence. Ancient stellar cartographers had named this region the Twilight Confluence, for its perpetual half-light, a realm forever caught between brightness and shadow. Ben Tennyson stood at the observation port of their ship, watching as Hay approached the smallest of the system's stars. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist with increasing frequency the closer they came to their destination, as though recognizing familiar territory. "We're approaching the coordinates," Elena reported from the pilot's station, nanites flowing across her fingertips as she interfaced directly with the navigation systems. Unusual energy signature detected on the third planetoid. Consistent with Galvan technology, but different. Ben nodded, unsurprised. Zenith's modifications. His work always diverged from standard Galvan approaches, more experimental, less constrained by tradition. The observation came naturally, though Ben had no conscious memory of studying Zenith's methodologies. The Red Ultimatrix was continuing to integrate information into his consciousness, providing context and knowledge he hadn't personally acquired. "How are you feeling?" Elena asked, glancing at him with clinical concern barely masking deeper worry. "It's been 60 hours since initial bonding. If the hologram's timeline is accurate, Phase 3 integration begins in approximately 12 hours, Ben completed her thought. "And yes, I can feel the changes accelerating. Neural pathways reorganizing, cognitive processes expanding." He met her gaze steadily. "But I'm still me, Elena. My core identity remains intact." She nodded, turning back to their approach vector. The secondary facility should contain the resources needed to monitor the transition safely. Assuming Zenith's automated systems have maintained it as they did the lunar base. The planetoid grew larger in their viewscreen, a misshapen rock barely 20 kilometers at its widest point, its surface scarred by ancient impacts and stellar wind erosion. No obvious structures were visible, but their sensors detected a massive complex buried beneath the regolith, powered by a fusion core that had operated continuously for centuries. Automated landing protocols activated, Elena reported as their ship was captured by a tractor beam emanating from the planetoid's surface. "Someone's expecting us." The beam guided them toward what appeared to be a solid rock face. As they approached, the surface rippled and parted, revealing a hangar bay carved into the planetoid's interior. Their ship settled onto a landing platform with gentle precision, automated systems powering down as external connections established themselves. "Pressurization complete," a synthetic voice announced throughout the hangar. "Atmosphere composition adjusted to Earth standard. Welcome, Red Ultimatrix wielder. Integration support systems standing by." Ben and Elena exchanged glances, both noting the facility's specific preparation for their arrival. The ship's hatch opened automatically, extending a boarding ramp to the hangar floor. Ben led the way, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing more rapidly as they entered the facility proper. Unlike the lunar base with its utilitarian Galvan design, this complex featured architecture that seemed to blend multiple species' aesthetic principles. Curved corridors reminiscent of Galvan precision transitioned into spaces with Petrosepian crystalline elements, which in turn gave way to chambers incorporating what appeared to be Celestial Sepian-inspired geometries that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "This isn't just a research station," Ben observed as they followed illuminated pathways deeper into the facility. "It's a testing ground for cross-species environmental integration." Elena's nanites sampled the surrounding materials, analyzing their composition. These structures aren't simply designed to accommodate different species, they're actively adapting to optimize for whoever occupies them. As if confirming her assessment, the corridor they traversed subtly reconfigured as they walked, ceiling height adjusting to their stature, atmospheric composition fine-tuning to their respiratory preferences, EV. Lighting spectrum shifting to optimal ranges for human visual processing. Zenith was studying environmental adaptation as part of his evolutionary research, Ben theorized, the knowledge emerging from his enhanced consciousness, creating spaces that evolve alongside their inhabitants. They reached a vast central chamber dominated by a platform similar to those they'd encountered previously, but significantly more advanced. This version featured interlocking rings of unknown alloy that rotated independently around a central axis, each inscribed with mathematical formulations that shifted and recalculated continuously. "Integration nexus detected," the facility's systems announced. "Calibrating for Phase 3 transition. Estimated time to optimal configuration, 11.4 hours. SURO. NDING. The platform were diagnostic stations, research terminals, and equipment unfamiliar even to Elena's extensive scientific knowledge. The entire chamber hummed with potential energy, systems awake, ning from centuries of standby mode to prepare for their intended purpose. "Looks like we arrived just in time," Ben noted with forced casualness that failed to mask his apprehension. Elena approached one of the terminals, her nanites interfacing with the unfamiliar technology. These systems contain complete documentation of the integration process, far more detailed than what we found at the lunar facility. Ben joined her, the Red Ultimatrix interfacing simultaneously with the terminal, facilitating instantaneous data transfer. Information flooded his consciousness, complex evolutionary theories, integration protocols, genetic manipulation techniques beyond current scientific understanding. Phase 3 isn't just about enhanced capability, he said softly as the implications became clear. It's a fundamental shift in evolutionary state, a transformation beyond the limitations of individual species. Elena nodded grimly. According to these specifications, the Red Ultimatrix will initiate a complete genetic reconstruction, incorporating optimal elements from multiple species into a singular, stable form, while preserving consciousness and identity, Ben added, highlighting a critical subsystem dedicated to maintaining cognitive continuity throughout the transformation. Zenith wasn't trying to create a new being, he was designing an evolutionary pathway that could be navigated safely by an existing consciousness. Before Elena could respond, the facility's sensors activated suddenly, alert protocols engaging throughout the complex. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing a massive energy distortion forming in orbit around the planetoid. Temporal anomaly detected, the system announced. Configuration matches Chronarch breach protocols. Defensive measures initiating. The distortion expanded rapidly, forming a swirling vortex of energy unlike anything Ben had witnessed before. Unlike the controlled portals created by Professor Paradox or the Time Hunter's technology, this disturbance appeared chaotic, its edges fluctuating wildly as though reality itself was being torn apart. That's not a controlled temporal entrance, Ben observed, Red Ultimatrix already scanning and analyzing the phenomenon. It's a temporal fracture, a catastrophic breakdown between time streams. Elena's nanites formed protective configurations around her body. The facility's defenses are activating, but they weren't designed for this magnitude of temporal disturbance. The fracture reached critical expansion, releasing a pulse of energy that washed over the planetoid in a visible wave. The facility's systems fluctuated momentarily, power grids stabilizing only after emergency protocols engaged. Something came through, Ben noted, tracking energy signatures on the facility's sensors. Impact point approximately 2 kilometers from our position. Activating the Red Ultimatrix's interface, Ben selected a transformation suitable for temporal disturbances. The device responded instantly, converting his human form into the enhanced version of clockwork he had utilized previously. I'll investigate, he informed Elena, mechanical components whirring with precise efficiency. The facility's temporal shielding should protect you here. Be careful, Elena cautioned, her scientific detachment briefly giving way to genuine concern. That fracture doesn't match any known Chronarch technology. Whatever came through could be completely unpredictable. Ben nodded his mechanical head once before activating Clockwork's temporal manipulation abilities. Space-time warped around him, accelerating his personal timestream relative to his surroundings. He moved through the facility at superluminal subjective speed, navigating to the surface access point in what felt like moments. Emerging onto the planetoid's barren surface, Ben immediately detected the aftermath of the temporal fracture. A crater approximately 50 meters in diameter marred the regolith. Its edges crystallized where intense energy had fused the surface material. At the center of the impact zone, a figure was rising slowly to its feet, disoriented but clearly alive. Ben approached cautiously. Temporal perception accelerated to provide maximum reaction time if the visitor proved hostile. As he drew closer, details became apparent, a humanoid figure clad in form-fitting armor of unfamiliar design. The technology appeared more advanced than anything in current galactic civilization, with integrated systems that seemed to phase between solid matter and energy states. Most notably, the armor bore unmistakable battle damage, scorch marks, impact fractures, and material deterioration that suggested extended conflict in extreme conditions. The figure noticed his approach, head snapping up with combat-honed awareness. A helmet retracted with liquid precision, revealing a human face, female, perhaps 25 years old, with features that suggested mixed Earth ancestry. Her hair was cropped in a practical military style, and a neural interface system was partially embedded in her left temple, glowing with the same crimson energy that powered the Red Ultimatrix. Her eyes widened in shock as she registered his appearance, recognition and horror mingling in her expression. "Impossible," she whispered, voice hoarse as though unused to speaking aloud. Nexus bearer was terminated in the chronal purge. Without warning, her armor reconfigured, components shifting to form offensive weaponry. She launched herself toward Ben with transhuman speed, Crater's loose regolith barely disturbed by her momentum-controlling technology. Temporal aberration confirmed, she announced with cold precision. Purification protocols engaged. Ben reacted instantly, generating a localized temporal field that slowed the attack to manageable speed. Even with this advantage, her assault was formidable, precision strikes targeting vulnerabilities in clockwork. K's mechanical body that suggested intimate familiarity with his transformation's capabilities. "I'm not your enemy," Ben stated, defensive systems engaging as he evaded her secondary attack. "I don't know what timeline you've come from. But I know exactly what you are," she interrupted, armor reconfiguring to counter his temporal manipulation. "The bearer of the red catalyst. The evolutionary nexus. The entity whose existence fractured the timeline and allowed the Chronarch Collective to harvest entire realities." Her accusations carried such conviction that Ben hesitated momentarily, low-ing enough for her to land a precision strike against his central timing mechanism. Pain lanced through his transformed body as temporal regulation systems temporarily destabilized. Ben responded by shifting tactics. No longer attempting to reason with the attacker, he generated a complex temporal bubble that isolated a 15-meter sphere from normal time flow, giving himself space to think and plan without immediate threat. Within this controlled environment, he analyzed his opponent more thoroughly. Her technology was beyond current galactic capabilities, but the foundational principles were recognizable, derived from Galvan design philosophies but evolved through centuries of development. Most significantly, her neural interface utilized energy patterns identical to the Red Ultimatrix, suggesting some connection to Zenith's work. As she struggled against the temporal bubble's constraints, Ben noticed a designation embedded in her armor's design: Temporal Correction Division, Operative Esther-379. When the bubble collapsed, Ben was prepared. Rather than continuing direct confrontation, he implemented a strategic approach that would have been beyond his capabilities days earlier. He generated a series of overlapping temporal fields, each operating at different frequencies to create a complex matrix that limited her mobility without causing harm. "I don't know what future you come from," Ben stated as she found herself constrained within his temporal network, "but I haven't done whatever it is you're accusing me of. The Red Ultimatrix bonded with me less than 3 days ago." Her struggles paused, eyes narrowing as she processed this information. 3 days. That's impossible. The integration cycle requires minimum 72 hours to reach Phase 3, and the Chronarch incursion doesn't occur until after Nexus Ascension. Yet here you are, Ben pointed out, apparently responding to a temporal fracture that just occurred. "And here I am, still pre-Phase 3 integration. Your timeline might not be as fixed as you believe." Uncertainty flickered across her features, the first crack in her resolute hostility. "Temporal authentication protocol," she demanded. "Current stellar date in standard reckoning." Ben provided the information, adding context from recent galactic events to confirm authenticity. Her expression shifted from skepticism to confusion, then to calculated reassessment. "If accurate, this predates Nexus Ascension by approximately 72 hours, she concluded, armor weapons powering down though remaining deployed. "Which means that whatever catastrophic future you're trying to prevent hasn't happened yet," Ben finished. "And maybe doesn't have to happen at all." She studied him with renewed intensity, neural interface scanning his form with particular focus on the Red Ultimatrix symbol visible on Clockwork's chest. "Integration Stage 2, she confirmed, apparently reading data invisible to normal perception. "Neural pathway reconfiguration at 83% completion. Genetic sequencing preparation initiated but not executed." Her posture relaxed marginally. "You haven't undergone ascension. And IATE understanding what this ascension entails before it happens," Ben replied, cautiously deactivating the temporal constraints as a show of good faith. "Starting with who you are and what future you're trying to prevent." She hesitated, conflict evident in her expression as she weighed operational protocols against immediate circumstances. Finally, she reached a decision, armor fully retracting its weapon systems. "Designation Esther, Temporal Correction Division," she introduced herself formally. "Dispatched from Earth year 5023 to eliminate the catalyst responsible for the Chronarch Collective's trans-temporal harvest campaign." Her eyes narrowed slightly. That catalyst being the Red Ultimatrix and its bearer, you. Ben reverted to human form, deciding that continuing the conversa as clockwork might reinforce her hostility. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed softly against his wrist, scanning Esther's technology with subtle energy tendrils invisible to normal perception. I understand your concern, he said carefully. But I think you may have incomplete information. I've already encountered the Chronarch Collective. They attempted to contain me precisely because they feared what the Red Ultimatrix might become. This revelation visibly startled her. You've directly encountered Chronarch entities. And survived. Not only survived, Ben confirmed, but managed to drive them off. They mentioned probability matrices showing potential catastrophic outcomes if the integration progressed, but also acknowledged uncertainty about alternate possibilities. Esther processed this information with evident difficulty, her worldview visibly recalibrating. That contradicts established historical records. The collective's first documented intervention occurs after ascension, not before. Then perhaps your historical records are incomplete, suggested a new voice from behind them. Both turned to see Elena approaching, her nanite-generated protective suit adapted for the planetoid's minimal atmosphere. She had evidently followed Ben after his departure, concerned by the unexpected temporal event. Are deliberately falsified, Elena continued, studying Esther with scientific interest. Temporal powers often manipulate historical narratives to serve their purposes. Esther's attention fixed on Elena, neural interface scanning rapidly. Human nanite symbiosis. Prototype integration technology. Her eyes widened in recognition. Elena Validus, your research forms the theoretical foundation of symbiotic enhancement systems utilized in my era. Elena's expression registered surprise before professional curiosity reasserted itself. Interesting. So my work has long-term implications. Your theoretical frameworks regarding biotechnological integration remain fundamental to advanced systems development for over 2,000 years, Esther confirmed with matter-of-fact precision. Including components of my own neural interface. Ben observed this exchange with strategic assessment, noting Esther's gradual shift from hostile combatant to cautious information source. I think we should continue this conversation inside the facility. The temporal fracture, may have alerted others to our presence. Esther nodded agreement, her tactical training evidently recognizing the sensible suggestion. As they returned to the facility's entrance, she continued scanning their surroundings with hyper-vigilant attention, particularly focused on potential temporal anomalies. Once back inside the complex, they made their way to a secure chamber adjacent to the main integration platform. The facility's systems acknowledged Esther's presence with curious attention, scanning her technology and apparently finding it compatible with existing protocols. Your neural interface, Ben observed as they settled into the chamber. It uses energy patterns identical to the Red Ultimatrix. That's not coincidental. Esther touched the device embedded in her temple reflexively. In my timeline, all temporal operatives are equipped with derivatives of the original technology. After the Chronarch harvest began, surviving human enclaves discovered that Zenith's research provided our only effective countermeasures against temporal manipulation. So the very technology you were sent to destroy became your civilization's salvation, Elena noted with ironic appreciation. History has a way of complicating simple narratives. Esther's expression hardened. The technology itself wasn't the catalyst, it was how it was used. The bearer's actions during the ascension created a unique temporal signature that the Chronarch Collective could detect and target across multiple realities. Ben leaned forward, finally approaching the critical question. What exactly happens during this ascension that makes it so catastrophic? Esther hesitated, then activated her neural interface. A holographic display materialized between them, showing a humanoid figure undergoing a transformation unlike anything Ben had witnessed before. The being's form shifted between multiple evolutionary states, energy cascading through biological systems as genetic structures reconfigured themselves repeatedly before settling into a singular, unprecedented configuration. The Red Ultimatrix was designed to create a nexus being, an entity capable of perceiving and manipulating the evolutionary trajectories of all life forms. She explained, the hologram shifting to show the transformed being interacting with various species' genetic structures. But during the ascension process, something unexpected occurred. The hologram displayed a massive temporal distortion forming around the nexus being, rippling outward to affect surrounding space-time. The transformation generated a unique temporal signature, a cosmic fingerprint, that the Chronarch Collective could detect across dimensional boundaries, Esther continued. They used this signature to locate and harvest timeline energy from multiple realities simultaneously, causing cascade failures throughout the multiverse. Timeline energy, Elena questioned, nanites forming complex analytical patterns as she studied the holographic data. The Chronarch Collective exists outside conventional time, Esther clarified. They sustain themselves by harvesting potential energy from timeline divergence points, moments where reality branches into multiple possibilities. The Nexus Ascension created the most significant divergence event in cosmic history, generating unprecedented energy levels that attracted their attention. Ben processed this information with enhanced cognitive abilities, connecting it with what he had already learned about the Red Ultimatrix and the Chronarch Collective. So the catastrophe wasn't caused by the Ascension itself, he reasoned, but by the Chronarch response to it. They detected the temporal signature and exploited it for harvesting operations. Correct, Esther confirmed. By the time the danger was recognized, multiple realities had already collapsed. The surviving human enclaves established the temporal correction division with one primary directive: prevent the Ascension from occurring in the first place. By eliminating the bearer, Ben concluded, understanding her initial hostility. Esther met his gaze directly. That was the original mission parameter. Your timeline placement complicates matters. You haven't undergone Ascension yet, which means the catastrophe can be prevented without termination. Assuming we can modify the Ascension process avoid creating the temporal signature that attracts the Chronarch, Elena added, scientific mind already formulating potential approaches, which would require intimate understanding of both the Red Ultimatrix's integration mechanics and Chronarch detection capabilities. The facility contains detailed documentation on the integration process, Ben noted. And my recent encounters with the collective might provide insights into their detection methods. Esther's expression revealed cautious optimism. If accurate, this represents a potential solution not considered in my timeline's historical analysis. Prevention rather than elimination. The facility's alert system suddenly activated, sensors detecting a new disturbance in the planetoid's orbit. Multiple temporal signatures detected, the automated voice announced. Configuration matches known Chronarch harvester vessels. Holographic displays showed 3 spacecraft of bizarre design approaching the planetoid, each resembling an elaborate clockwork mechanism encased in crystalline structures that seem to exist partially outside normal space-time. Harvesters, Esther identified them, alarm evident in her voice. They shouldn't be here, not at this point in the timeline. The temporal fracture that brought you here, Ben reasoned. They must have detected it and followed the signature. If they establish a harvesting field around this planetoid, we'll be trapped, Esther warned, armor reconfiguring for combat. Their extraction technology can isolate entire sections of space-time for processing. Ben accessed the Red Ultimatrix, reviewing available transformations with strategic consideration rather than impulsive selection. The facility's defenses, inadequate against Chronarch technology, Esther replied grimly. This outpost wasn't designed for direct conflict with trans-temporal entities. Elena's nanites formed complex analytical configurations. The ship we arrived in has experimental stealth capabilities. If we can reach it before they establish a complete containment field. Unlikely, Esther assessed bluntly. Harvester approach vectors indicate standard encirclement protocol. Hale have detection grids active across all potential escape trajectories. Ben completed his tactical analysis, selecting a transformation with precise intent rather than raw power. I have another option. The Red Ultimatrix activated, transforming him into Phantasma, the shadowy form he had utilized for stealth operations previously. Red energy patterns traced more complex configurations across his ethereal body, indicating further adaptation of the form's capabilities. This transformation can phase between dimensional states, he explained, voice emanating from multiple points simultaneously. With proper calibration, it might be able to disrupt their containment field generators. Esther studied his transformed state with professional assessment. Phasmodian configuration, she identified with surprising familiarity. Advanced temporal phasing capabilities, but limited offensive impact against Chronarch technology. Not alone, Ben acknowledged. But combined with your future tech and Alina's nanites, we might create enough disruption to escape their encirclement. The strategic approach impressed both women, though neither stated it directly. Instead, they quickly formulated a coordinated plan. Esther's combat experience complementing Alina's scientific expertise and Ben's transformative capabilities. The harvesters will deploy field generators at equidistant points around the planetoid. Esther explained, creating a tactical hologram with her neural interface. Standard procedure uses 3 anchor points to establish a triangular containment zone. If we can disable even one anchor, the entire field collapses, Elena noted, nanites forming configurations designed for targeted technological disruption. I'll approach from phase-shifted dimensional space, Ben decided. Phantasma's form already adjusting to optimize for the mission. Alina's nanites can disrupt their communication systems while Esther provides tactical guidance based on her knowledge of Chronarch operations. The plan formulated with remarkable efficiency, each contributing specialized knowledge that created a comprehensive strategy. Within minutes, they were moving toward the surface access points, Esther's combat experience guiding their approach through the facility's defensive network. As they prepared to engage, the facility's communication system suddenly activated. Detecting an incoming transmission on a frequency not used by the Chronarch vessels. Unidentified signal detected, the system announced. Origin. Approaching vessel on counter-orbital trajectory to Chronarch harvesters. The tactical display shifted to show another ship entering the system, smaller than the harvesters but moving with remarkable speed and precision. Its design was unfamiliar to Ben and Elena, combining elements of various species technology into a unique configuration optimized for both stealth and combat. Most surprisingly, it broadcast a recognition code that the facility immediately acknowledged. Archaeological research vessel, Forgotten Light, identified, the facility announced. Plumber Special Division authentication confirmed. Esther's expression registered confusion, another variable not accounted for in historical records. The incoming transmission resolved into a familiar voice. This is Kai Green to Kyludine facility. Ben, if you're receiving this, the Chronarch vessels are deploying temporal containment technology. You have approximately 6 minutes before the field establishes complete isolation. Ben exchanged surprised glances with Elena before responding. Kai, how did you find us? I've been tracking Zenith's research sites since our encounter in the jungle, Kai's voice replied with professional efficiency. When Plumber Senso, RS detected a temporal fracture in this system, I calculated a high probability you'd be involved. She's deploying countermeasures, Esther noted with analytical precision, tracking the new vessel's movements on the tactical display. Ancient Chronarch disruption technology, impressive for this era. Indeed, Kai's ship was releasing devices that generated interference patterns in the harvesters' approach vectors, temporarily disrupting their formation. That won't stop them for long, Kai warned through the communication channel. I'm creating a gap in their containment pattern. Get to your ship and prepare for immediate departure. I'll transmit rendezvous coordinates once we're clear of the system. Ben made a rapid tactical reassessment. Change of plans. We focus on reaching our ship while Kai maintains the disruption field. Questions and introductions can wait until we're safely away from the harvesters. Neither woman argued with the logical adjustment. They moved with coordinated efficiency toward the hangar bay, Ben's Phantasma form scouting ahead to detect potential threats while Esther provided tactical support and Elena prepared their ship's systems for emergency departure. The Chronarch vessels had begun deploying smaller craft, hunter units similar to those Ben had encountered previously, but with equipment specifically designed for capture rather than combat. They're not trying to destroy us, Esther observed as they reached the hangar. They want to capture the Red Ultimatrix intact, to study its temporal signature properties. Which confirms your theory about their interest in the Ascension event, Elena noted, nanites interfacing with their ship's systems to accelerate pre-launch procedures. Ben maintained Phantasma form, extending Shadow ET Endrils to interface with the facility's defense systems. I can activate the outpost's automated protocols to buy us additional time. His connection with the facility's technology was instantaneous and comprehensive. Phantasma's abilities enhanced by the Red Ultimatrix's growing integration with his consciousness. Complex defense systems activated under his direction, targeting the approaching hunter units with precision countermeasures. As their ship powered up, the facility itself seemed to respond to Ben's commands with unexpected sophistication, reconfiguring internal structures to create false signatures that would confuse Chronarch sensors while simultaneously establishing a protected departure corridor. The facility's adaptive intelligence is cooperating with your directives beyond normal parameters, Elena observed. Nanites detecting the unusual response pattern. It's almost as if it recognizes the Red Ultimatrix as an authority override, Ben confirmed, the Nold GE emerging naturally from his enhanced understanding. Zenith programmed his facilities to prioritize the device's wielder above all other protocols. Their ship lifted off as the hangar bay doors opened, revealing the planetoid's barren surface and the space beyond, now dominated by the three massive Chronarch harvesters attempting to establish their containment field. Kai's vessel maneuvered between them with remarkable skill, disruption devices continuing to create interference patterns that prevented field stabilization. Departure vector calculated, Elena announced, nanites flowing across the control interface, following Kai's disruption pattern to navigate the gap in their formation. Ben maintained his connection with the facility's systems until the last possible moment, directing defensive countermeasures to cover their escape trajectory. As their ship accelerated away from the planetoid, he finally reverted to human form, the extended transformation having required significant concentration to maintain. Impressive tactical application, Esther commented, observing their escape with professional assessment. The bearer's historical records didn't emphasize strategic capabilities. Things change. Ben replied simply, taking the pilot's position as Elena shifted to defensive systems management. Their ship threaded the narrow gap in the Chronarch formation, sends oars detecting the harvesters, attempts to recalibrate their containment field to compensate for the disruption. Kai's vessel maintained precise positioning ahead of them, its wake creating additional interference that further complicated the Chronarch tracking systems. Once clear of the immediate containment zone, both ships accelerated to maximum sublight speed, preparing for hyperspace transition at the system's edge. The Chronarch vessels pursued but seemed unwilling to engage their full capabilities, perhaps concerned about damaging the Red Ultimatrix that they apparently valued for study. Rendezvous coordinates received, Elena reported as they approached the hyperspace transition point. Kai's directing us to a location in the Vivaxian Nebula, approximately 3 hours at maximum speed. Secure transmission channel, Ben instructed, establishing communication with Kai's vessel. We need to coordinate our jump to ensure the Chronarch can't track our hyperspace vectors. Kai's face appeared on the communication screen, her expression professionally focused though her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Esther in the background. I see you've acquired another companion since leaving Earth, she noted with carefully neutral tone. Should I assume this relates to the temporal fracture? This is Esther, Ben confirmed, making abbreviated introductions. She's from approximately 3,000 years in our future, with information critical to understanding the Chronarch collective's interest in the Red Ultimatrix. Kai processed this with remarkable composure. The more immediate concern is evading their pursuit. My ship can generate a hyperspace masking field that should prevent them from tracking our jump signatures, but we'll need to enter hyperspace simultaneously within the field's radius. Ben nodded, fingers dancing across the navigation controls with precision that would have been beyond his capabilities days earlier. Transmitting synchronized jump calculations now. The ships aligned their trajectories perfectly, Kai's vessel generating the promised masking field that enveloped both craft in a shimmering energy envelope. The Chronarch harvesters accelerated their pursuit, apparently recognizing the imminent escape attempt. Jump in 3, 2, 1, execute, Ben counted down, both ships transitioning to hyperspace with synchronize precision that left no traceable signature for the pursuers to follow. The star-streaked dimension of hyperspace enveloped them, temporary safety allowing the first real moment of relaxation since the temporal fracture had occurred. Ben leaned back in the pilot's chair, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing softly against his wrist with what almost felt like approval. That was well executed, Esther acknowledged. Armor reconfiguring to more comfortable settings now that immediate threat had passed. The coordination between vessels exceeded tactical parameters I would have expected from this era's technology. Kai Green specializes in adapting ancient technologies for modern application, Elena explained, her own nanites settling into monitoring patterns rather than combat readiness. Particle. Are those related to temporal entities like the Chronarch Collective? Ben turned to Esther, the immediate crisis resolved enough to return to their interrupted discussion. You mentioned that your timeline's historical records didn't emphasize my strategic capabilities. What exactly did they focus on? Esther's expression became guarded, neural interface flickering as though processing secure. Why protocols regarding information disclosure? After visible deliberation, she reached a decision. The historical account of the bearer, of you, focuses primarily on power manifestation rather than tactical application. She explained carefully. Records describe the Red Ultimatrix integration as producing unprecedented capabilities but accompanied by personality alterations that emphasized dominance and control rather than protection. You're saying I become some kind of power-mad tyrant? Ben asked, keeping his tone neutral despite the disturbing implication. Not exactly, Esther clarified. The records suggest the integration process itself altered your fundamental perception of responsibility, shifting from protection of individuals to control of evolutionary destiny. Your actions weren't described as malevolent, but as catastrophically interventionist, attempting to optimize evolutionary paths across multiple worlds simultaneously. Ben absorbed this assessment thoughtfully. Quote, and these actions created the temporal signature that attracted the Chronarch Collective. Correct. The simultaneous manipulation of evolutionary trajectories across multiple planets generated a distinct pattern in the temporal fabric, a beacon, that drew their attention from beyond conventional space-time. Alina's scientific curiosity engaged fully. This suggests the danger isn't in the ascension itself, but in how the resulting capabilities are applied. If Ben underwent the transformation but limited his interventions in evolutionary patterns, the temporal signature might never form. Esther completed the thought, her expression revealing cautious consideration of this possibility. That wasn't a scenario considered in our tactical briefings. The assumption was always that ascension inevitably led to wide-scale evolutionary manipulation. Ben processed this information with his enhanced cognitive abilities, connecting it with what he had learned about Zenith's intentions and the Red Ultimatrix's design. The device enhances capability but doesn't control application, he reasoned, an understanding that had been growing since his first encounter with the technology. Zenith created the tools for evolutionary intervention, but the wielder determines how those tools are used. A critical distinction, Elena agreed, and potentially the key to avoiding the catastrophic future Esther describes. The hyperspace journey continued in thoughtful silence, each processing the implications of their discussion from different perspectives. Ben monitored their course while simultaneously reviewing everything he had learned about the Red Ultimatrix, the Ascension process, and the Chronarch Collective's involvement. The Red Ultimatrix itself continued its internal transformation, neural connections strengthening as Phase 3 approached. Ben could feel the changes accelerating, cognitive enhancements becoming more pronounced, perspective shifting in subtle but fundamental ways. Yet his core values remained intact, his essential identity unchanged despite the expanding capabilities. After nearly 3 hours of hyperspace transit, they approached the coordinates Kai had provided. The Vivaxian nebula materialized around them as they returned to normal space, a vast cloud of luminous gases in blues and purples, stellar formation processes creating natural interference that would complicate any pursuit. Kai's ship maintained position ahead of them, leading the way deeper into the nebula where sensor readings became increasingly unreliable. They navigated through shifting gas formations and newborn star clusters until reaching a region where the nebula's density decreased unexpectedly, revealing a structure hidden within the cosmic cloud. What is that? Elena asked, nanites enhancing visual perception to compensate for the nebula's interference. The structure appeared to be an ancient space station of enormous proportions, its architecture unlike anything in current galactic records. Curved segments reminiscent of Chronarch technology integrated with crystalline formations that seemed to phase between normal space and some other dimensional state. Vivax Outpost. Esther identified it with evident surprise. A monitoring station established to observe Chronarch activity during the first incursion period. But according to historical records, it wasn't discovered until the late 27th century. History continues to be more complicated than your records suggest, Ben observed as Kai's ship docked with the station's massive central hub. They followed suit, their vessel's systems interfacing smoothly with the station's automated docking protocols. As pressure equalized between ship and station, Kai's voice came through their communication system. The station's defensive systems are active but dormant, she informed them. I've been studying this outpost for months. It contains the most comprehensive information on Chronarch technology and tactics ever assembled in one location. Ben led the way as they disembarked, the red Ultimatrix pulsing with increased frequency as they entered the station's interior. The architecture was even more impressive up close, a seamless integration of technologies from multiple species and time periods, all focused on a singular purpose: understanding and countering Chronarch operations. Kai awaited them in a vast chamber that appeared to serve as the station's command center. She stood beside a holographic display showing real-time tracking of temporal disturbances throughout the galaxy, her attention shifting from the data to her visitors as they entered. Like Esther, she had changed since their jungle encounter, not physically, but in demeanor and focus. Where the archaeologic researcher had shown glimpses of the adventurous spirit Ben remembered from their youth, this Kai projected the composed authority of someone who had devoted herself entirely to a critical mission. Her gaze moved from Ben to Elena, acknowledging the scientist with professional courtesy before settling on Esther with evident curiosity. Temporal displacement, she observed immediately, studying Esther's armor and neural interface. Significant technological advancement beyond current parameters. I assume you're the source of the fracture detected in the Kyludine system. Esther nodded once, her own analytical assessment clearly registering Kai's unexpected expertise. Designation Esther, Temporal Correction Division. Your understanding of temporal phenomena exceeds historical documentation for this era. I've been studying the Chronarch Collective since discovering references to them in ancient Tep Kufin records 2 years ago, Kai explained, turning back to the holographic display. This station contains observational data gathered over nearly 6,000 years by a coalition of species attempting to understand Chronarch harvesting patterns. Ben approached the display, the red Ultimatrix interfacing automatically with the station's systems. Information flowed into his consciousness, historical accounts of Chronarch incursions, technical specifications of their harvesting technology, theoretical models of their extra-dimensional existence. They target temporal convergence points, he observed, the pattern becoming clear through his enhanced cognition. Moments, where multiple potential timelines intersect, generating maximum harvesting potential. Exactly, Kai confirmed, which is why they're so interested in the red Ultimatrix. According to the station's predictive models, the device's ascension process represents the most significant temporal convergence point in recorded history. Elena joined them at the display, nanites analyzing the data independently. The Kyludine facility was preparing for Phase 3 integration, the ascension that Esther described. According to her timeline, this event creates the temporal signature that attracts Chronarch attention. Then we need to prevent it, Kai stated with firm conviction. Not necessarily, Ben countered, surprising all 3 women. We need to modify it. The ascension itself isn't inherent, catastrophic. It's how the resulting capabilities are applied that creates the temporal signature attracting the collective. He manipulated the holographic display, integrating information from He read Ultimatrix with the station's data to create a new model. If I undergo the ascension but limit the application of evolutionary manipulation to contained parameters, the temporal signature might never form. Kai studied the model with evident skepticism. That's an enormous risk based on theoretical possibility. If you're wrong, we face the same catastrophic outcome Esther's timeline experienced. And if we attempt to prevent the ascension entirely, we potentially lose the only technology capable of effectively countering Chronarch harvesting operations, Ben argued. According to Esther, derivatives of the red Ultimatrix become humanity's primary defense against temporal manipulation in her future. This created a momentary impasse, each perspective valid from different analytical frameworks. The tension was broken by Elena, her scientific approach providing a potential middle path. We have approximately 8 hours before Phase 3 initiates according to the Kyludine facility's timeline, she noted. That gives us time to study both possibilities more thoroughly using the station's predictive systems. Esther nodded agreement. The station's temporal modeling capabilities exceed anything available to the correction division in my era. We could simulate multiple ascension scenarios with varying parameters. Kai considered this approach, professional assessment, overriding personal preference for immediate action. The simulation cores are in the lower research levels. They were designed specifically to model Chronarch response patterns to various temporal events. With that qualified agreement, they established a working plan. Kai and Esther would configure the simulation systems based on their respective knowledge of Chronarch behavior and future outcomes. Elena would provide biological expertise regarding the integration process, while Ben would supply direct data from the Red Ultimatrix regarding its operational parameters. As the others prepared the necessary systems, Ben found a moment of relative solitude in an observation dome overlooking the nebula. The cosmic vista provided a fitting backdrop for contemplation of the choices before him. Choices with implications extending far beyond his personal future. The Red Ultimatrix pulsed against his wrist with increasing urgency, internal processes accelerating as Phase 3 approached. He could feel the changes progressing within his consciousness, neural pathways reconfiguring, perspective expanding, awareness extending beyond normal human limitations. Yet through these transformations, his essential identity remained intact. His core values, protection over domination, responsibility over power, choice over control, continued to guide his thinking despite the enhanced capabilities developing within him. "You've changed since the jungle," Kai's voice interrupted his thoughts as she joined him at the observation window. "And I don't just mean the device on your wrist." Ben turned to face her, noting the careful assessment in her expression. "The integration affects cognitive processing, perspective, information analysis, but not core identity or values. At least, not so far. Esther's account suggests otherwise," Kai pointed out. "In her timeline, the ascension fundamentally altered your approach to responsibility." "Or her historical records are incomplete," Ben countered. "Possibly even deliberately manipulated to justify the Temporal Correction Division's elimination directive." Kai didn't immediately reject this possibility, which surprised Ben. The Kai he remembered from their earlier adventures would have taken a more definitive position. "You've changed too," he observed. "This obsessive focus on the Chronarch Collective, it's more than just archaeological interest." Something flickered in her expression, a momentary break in professional composure revealing deeper motivation. 2 years ago, I discovered a temporal distortion site in the Kassite ruins on Gehenna Prime. The artifacts there contained warnings about beings who harvested entire civilizations from outside time itself. "The Chronarch Collective," Ben surmised. Kai nodded. "While investigating, I experienced a temporal echo, a phenomenon where possible future outcomes briefly overlay present perception. I saw devastation beyond comprehension. Entire worlds collapsed into singularities, timelines severed, reality itself unraveling." Her voice remained controlled, but the memory clearly affected her deeply. "After that, understanding and countering the Chronarch threat became my primary focus. I've spent the past 2 years tracking their activities across historical records, identifying patterns, searching for weaknesses. Leading you to this station," Ben concluded. "And now to you," Kai added, gaze shifting to the Red Ultimatrix. "The device on your wrist represents either our greatest threat or our best defense against what I saw in that temporal echo. I'm still not certain which." Before Ben could respond, Elena appeared at the entrance to the observation dome. "The simulation systems are ready. We've configured the first model based on Esther's historical parameters." They rejoined the others in the research level, where multiple holographic displays showed complex temporal modeling calculations in progress. Esther stood before the primary simulation neural interface connected directly to the station's systems to provide future state parameters. "The baseline simulation reproduces the catastrophic outcome from my timeline," she explained as Ben and Kai approached. "Ascension occurs, followed by wide-scale evolutionary manipulation across multiple worlds simultaneously, creating the distinct temporal signature that attracts Chronarch harvesting operations." The simulation played through this scenario with chilling precision, showing the cascading collapse of affected timelines as the Chronarch Collective established harvesting yields around the temporal signature's origin points. "Now we've modified key variables," Elena continued, activating a second simulation. "This model assumes ascension occurs but evolutionary manipulation remains limited to controlled parameters, isolated environments rather than planetary scales, single species focus rather than ecosystem-wide adjustments." This alternative simulation showed a dramatically different outcome. The ascension still occurred, but the resulting temporal signature remained localized, below the threshold that triggered chronarch detection in the previous model. A third possibility, Kai suggested: inputting additional parameters. What if the ascension process itself were modified? The Red Ultimatrix contains programmable components. If we adjusted the transformation parameters before Phase 3 initiates, the system processed this approach, generating a new simulation that showed a modified ascension, one that maintained enhanced capabilities but specifically limited evolutionary manipulation powers to defensive rather than interventionist applications. Ben studied all three simulations with analytical precision, the Red Ultimatrix interfacing dire CTLY with the station's systems to provide additional data regarding integration protocols and potential modifications. The third option shows the most promise, he concluded after careful assessment. By reprogramming specific parameters within the Red Ultimatrix before Phase 3 initiates, we can maintain enhanced capabilities while preventing the formation of the temporal signature that attracts chronarch attention. Esther's neural interface processed the simulation results independently, confirming Ben's assessment. This approach represents a 78.3% probability of avoiding the catastrophic outcome from my timeline while preserving defensive capabilities against chronarch technology. The question is whether such reprogramming is possible, Elena noted, scientific caution tempering optimism. The Red Ultimatrix's core systems are unlike any technology I've encountered. Even my nanites can only interface with its peripheral functions. The station's databases might contain relevant information, Kai suggested. Accessing the central archives. The chronarch collective wasn't the only temporal power observed by this outpost. There are records of encounters with entities capable of manipulating similar technologies. Her search produced unexpected results. References to a being known in multiple historical records as Paradox, including documented encounters with chronarch entities and technologies similar to the Red Ultimatrix. Professor Paradox, Ben identified immediately. He's assisted me with temporal crises before. If anyone would understand how to safely modify the device's programming, it would be him. Attempting to contact a temporal being seems counterproductive when we're trying to avoid drawing attention from other temporal powers, Kai pointed out skeptically. Paradox operates independently of the chronarch collective, Ben explained. He's intervened numerous times to prevent temporal catastrophes, often in opposition to other time-manipulating entities. The designation appears in historical records from my era as well, Esther confirmed. Neural interface accessing stored information. Classified as a benevolent temporal observe. With documented instances of intervention against chronarch harvesting operations. The question is how to contact him, Elena noted practically. In my experience, Paradox appears when temporal crises reach critical junctures. Not when summoned. Ben considered this challenge, the Red Ultimatrix pulsing with increased frequency as if responding to his thought process. The device itself might provide the solution. If it's creating a temporal signature that eventually attracts chronarch attention, it might similarly draw Paradox's notice, especially if we amplify specific frequency patterns. This approach leveraged Ben's enhanced understanding of temporal mechanics, combining theoretical knowledge with practical application in a way that impressed even Esther's future tech perspective. The station's temporal beacon system could be reconfigured to amplify the Red Ultimatrix's current emission patterns, she suggested, neural interface already calculating the necessary modifications. Specifically targeting frequency ranges associated with benevolent temporal entities rather than harvester detection parameters. They worked together with remarkable efficiency, each contributing specialized knowledge to the complex reconfiguration. Kai's understanding of the station's systems complemented Elena's technological expertise, while Esther's future knowledge provided crucial targeting parameters. Ben coordinated their efforts, the Red Ultimatrix interfacing directly with the beacon systems to establish precise calibration. As the modified beacon activated, the Red Ultimatrix's pulsing increased dramatically, crimson energy flowing from the device into the station's systems, creating a targeted temporal signal unlike anything previously documented. Signal established, Elena confirmed. Nanites monitoring the energy flow. Propagating across 17 temporal frequency bands simultaneously. Now we wait, Kai stated, monitoring the station's defensive systems for any unwanted attention their signal might attract. The wait proved remarkably brief. Within minutes, The air in the center of the chamber shimmered with familiar energy patterns, coalescing into the form of a man in antiquated academic attire, complete with lab coat and goggles pushed up on his forehead. Benjamin Tennyson, Professor Paradox greeted him with characteristic calm despite the unprecedented circumstances. I see you've acquired quite the interesting accessories since our last encounter. And assembled a rather remarkable team as well. His gaze moved knowingly across Kai, Elena, and finally Esther, whose presence seemed to particularly interest him. A visitor from the future. How delightfully complicated this has become. Professor, Ben acknowledged, oddly relieved by the time traveler's familiar demeanor. We have a situation that requires your expertise. Indeed you do, Paradox agreed, examining the Red Ultimatrix with analytical interest rather than alarm. Zenith's masterwork, finally activated after all these centuries, and approaching Phase 3 integration, if my temporal senses are correct. You know about the device? Ben asked, though not entirely surprised. I make it a point to know about all technologies with significant temporal implications, Paradox replied casually. Though I confess, I didn't anticipate you would become its wielder. A fascinating turn of events with complicated potential outcomes. Esther stepped forward, neural interface scanning Paradox with evident fascination. You're exactly as described in historical records. We require your assistance to prevent a catastrophic temporal harvesting operation conducted by the Chronarch Collective in response to the Ascension event. Paradox's expression shifted to one of greater seriousness. Ah, the Collective, temporal parasites of the highest order. I've had numerous disagreements with them regarding their harvesting practices. He turned back to Ben, studying the Red Ultimatrix more carefully. The device is indeed approaching Phase 3. The evolutionary ascension that Zenith designed as its ultimate purpose. In most probability branches, this event creates a distinct temporal signature that attracts Chronarch attention, leading to precisely the catastrophic harvesting operation your future friend describes. We've modeled an alternative approach, Ben explained, displaying the simulation they had developed. By modifying the Red Ultimatrix's programming before Phase 3 initiates, we believe we can prevent the formation of the specific temporal signature while maintaining enhanced capabilities. Paradox reviewed their work with impressed expression. An elegant solution with significantly improved probability outcomes. The modificati would require precise recalibration of the device's evolutionary manipulation parameters, essentially maintaining the capability while constraining its application scope. Is such recalibration possible? Elena asked, the critical question that had brought them to seek Paradox's help. Possible, yes. Simple, no, Paradox answered, producing a pocket watch-like device from his coat. The Red Ultimatrix's core programming is quantum-locked against external modification, a security measure Zenith implemented to prevent precisely this kind of intervention. Then we've reached a dead end, Kai concluded with evident frustration. Not quite, Paradox countered. While external modification is prevented, internal reconfiguration remains viable. The device was designed to adapt to its wielder's conscious directives during the ascension process itself. Ben understood the implication immediately. You're saying I can guide the transformation from within, reshape its parameters during the Phase 3 integration rather than before it begins. Precisely, Paradox confirmed. The ascension must occur, but its outcome remains malleable based on the wielder's conscious intent. Zenith believed that evolution should be directed rather than random, but he recognized that the specific direction must be determined by the Nexus being, not predetermined by the device's creator. This revelation aligned with what Ben had intuitively suspected about the Red Ultimatrix's design philosophy. It provided capability without dictating application, power without controlling purpose. The risk is considerable, Esther pointed out. Neural interface calculating probability matrices. Maintaining conscious direction during a complete evolutionary restructuring exceeds normal cognitive parameters. Indeed, Paradox acknowledged, which is why preparation is essential. The wielder's core identity, their fundamental values and principles, must be firmly established before ascension begins. THSA will serve as anchors during the transformation, ensuring that enhanced capabilities align with established ethical frameworks. Elena's scientific mind focused on practical implementation. How do we establish such anchors? The integration has already progressed significantly. Through connection, Paradox replied simply. The Red Ultimatrix responds to relational patterns as well as logical constructs. Meaningful interactions with others reinforce core identity markers, establishing priority parameters that persist through the transformation process. The implication was clear: Ben's relationships with others, particularly those present, would help anchor his identity during the ascension, preventing the shift toward interventionist control that had apparently occurred in Esther's timeline. We have approximately 6 hours before Phase 3 initiates, Ben noted, the Red Ultimatrix's pulsing confirming his assessment. Is that sufficient time for the necessary preparation? It will have to be, Paradox replied, his normally casual demeanor showing rare solemnity. The Chronarch Collective has already detected anomalous temporal activity in this region. Their harvester vessels are adjusting course toward the Vivaxian Nebula as we speak. This news created immediate concern, Kai moving to the station's monitoring systems to confirm Paradox's warning. The displays showed multiple temporal distortions forming at the nebula's edge, far larger and more numerous than those they had encountered at the Kyludine facility. 7 harvester vessels, Esther identified, alarm evident in her voice. A full extraction fleet. They shouldn't commit resources of this magnitude unless. Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. Unless they've detected potential timeline collapse already beginning. Paradox completed her thought. The temporal fracture that brought you here, combined with the Red Ultimatrix approaching Phase 3, has created preliminary disruptio. N patterns similar to those preceding a major harvesting opportunity. They think it's already happening, Ben concluded. And they're positioning themselves to capitalize on it. Which means we don't have the luxury of delaying the ascension or attempting to prevent it, Elena realized. If the temporal disruptions continue without resolving into a stable pattern, the collective will implement scorched timeline protocols. Esther confirmed grimly, harvesting all potential energy regardless of collateral damage to surrounding reality structures. Paradox nodded gravely. The station's temporal shielding will protect you temporarily, but once the extraction fleet establishes full containment, no conventional escape will be possible. The situation had transformed from theoretical planning to immediate crisis. The approach they had developed, modifying the ascension from within rather than preventing it, was now their only viable option, with significantly compressed preparation time. What exactly do we need to do? Ben asked Paradox, decision made and focus shifting to implementation. The station contains a chamber originally designed for observing temporal phenomena safely, Paradox explained, leading them deeper into the research level. With minor modifications, it can serve as an isolated environment for the ascension process, containing the initial energy relay. Say while allowing conscious direction of the transformation parameters. They reached a spherical room constructed of material that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, similar to the Chronarch technology they had observed but apparently designed for protective rather than extractive purposes. Temporal isolation chamber, Esther identified it. Advanced versions are still used in my era for chronological research. This particular chamber was created by a coalition of temporal researchers attempting to understand Chronarch harvesting methods, Paradox elaborated. It's GNED to observe timeline fluctuations without being affected by them, perfect for containing the initial phases of ascension while allowing deliberate reconfiguration. Elena's nanites analyzed the chamber's construction, interfacing with control systems to assess necessary modifications. We can adapt the containment parameters to accommodate the Red Ultimatrix's energy patterns. The station's POW systems should be sufficient to maintain stability during the transformation. As they prepared the chamber, Paradox took Ben aside for crucial guidance regarding the ascension process itself. When Phase 3 begins, you'll experience complete genetic reconstruction at an accelerated rate, he explained, unusually direct in his instructions. Your consciousness will expand beyond normal parameters, perceiving multiple evolutionary pathways simultaneously. This is the critical juncture where your core identity must assert priority. How will I know which pathways to choose? Ben asked, the enormity of the task becoming increasingly apparent. Trust your fundamental values, Paradox advised. The specific capabilities matter less than the principles guiding their application. Focus on protection rather than control, balance rather than dominance, choice rather than determination. As the others completed technical preparations, Ben found himself facing each of them individually. Li, brief but meaningful interactions that Paradox had suggested would help anchor his identity during the transformation. Elena approached first, her scientific detachment temporarily set aside. I've configured monitoring systems to track the transformation process, she explained, though her expression conveyed deeper concern than her words. The nanite interface we established earlier should provide a communication link even during the most intense phases. Thank you, Ben replied sincerely. For everything, not just the technical support, but for understanding what this device represents without fear or judgment. We're not so different, she acknowledged, glancing at her hand where nanites flowed beneath the skin. Both navigating the integration of alien technology with human consciousness. Just come back as yourself, Ben. Enhanced, evolved, but still you. Their shared experience with biotechnological integration created a connection different from his relationships with others, a mutual understanding of what it meant to be simultaneously human and something more. Esther found him next, her future warrior persona somewhat diminished by the unprecedented situation. Temporal models indicate 67.3% probability of successful parameter modification during ascension, she reported, neural interface displaying the relevant calculations. Higher than any alternative approach currently viable. But still not certainty, Ben noted. Certainty doesn't exist in temporal mechanics, she replied with unexpected philosophical insight. Only probability vectors and choice points. What matters is the integrity of decision-making at critical junctures. Ben studied her with newfound appreciation for the complexity behind her military exterior. In your timeline, It happened to me after the catastrophe began. The historical records you mentioned. Esther hesitated, internal conflict visible as she weighed operational security against present circumstances. The bearer, you, attempted to counter Chronarch harvesting operations directly. For a time, you succeeded in preserving significant reality sectors through controlled evolutionary acceleration of defensive species. This wasn't the power-mad tyrant Ben had initially inferred from her earlier descriptions. So even in your timeline, I was fighting against the collective, not cooperating with them. Yes, she acknowledged, but at tremendous cost. The escalating conflict between your evolutionary manipulations and their harvesting technology created collateral damage across multiple timelines. Eventually, the remaining temporal authorities determined that preventing the initial ascension represented the only viable solution. This clarification provided crucial context. Ben's future self had maintained protective intentions even after ascension, but the means employed had ultimately proven as destructive as the threat they opposed. The distinction reinforced Paradox's guidance about using on how capabilities were applied rather than the capabilities themselves. Finally, Kai approached as the chamber preparations neared completion. Unlike the others, her expression remained guarded. Professional assessment never fully giving way to personal connection. The station's defensive systems are configured to maximum capacity, she reported. They won't stop the extraction fleet, but they should delay full containment long enough for the ascension process to complete. Ben recognized the practical focus as her way of maintaining emotional distance, a pattern familiar from their complicated history. Kai, I need to ask you something important. Her expression shifted slightly, wariness mingling with reluctant curiosity. What, in the temporal echo you experienced, the scion of devastation that set you on this path, did you see me? Was I part of what you witnessed? The question clearly struck a nerve, her composed facade momentarily fracturing. Yes, she admitted quietly. I saw you at the center of it all, transformed into something I didn't recognize, wielding power beyond comprehension. That's why I've been so cautious around me, Ben completed. It makes sense now. You've been preparing for this moment since that vision, uncertain whether I would be the cause or the solution. The echo showed possibilities, not certainties, she clarified, professional restraint reasserting itself. I've spent 2 years studying temporal phenomena, learning to distinguish between probable outcomes and manipulated perceptions. What I saw was real, but not inevitable. And now, Ben asked, what do you believe will happen when I enter that chamber? Kai considered the question with genuine thoughtfulness, setting aside preconceptions to assess the present reality rather than feared possibilities. I believe you'll face the most significant challenge of your life, she finally answered. and that the outcome depends not on the power you gain, but on how firmly you hold to the person you've always been beneath all the transformations. Her perspective perfectly complemented Paradox's guidance, focusing on core identity rather than enhanced capability. Is the determining factor in the ascension's outcome. With preparations complete and these crucial connections established, Ben approached the temporal isolation chamber. The red ultimatrix pulse, D with increasing urgency against his wrist, internal processes accelerating as Phase 3 drew imminent. The chamber will maintain temporal stability during the transformation, Paradox explained as final adjustments were completed. Alina's monitoring systems will track your physiological status while Esther's neural interface provides chronological anchoring. Kai will manage the station's defensive systems to delay Chronarch containment as long as possible. And you? Ben asked the time traveler. Paradox smiled enigmatically. I'll be ensuring that certain temporal authorities remain unaware of exactly what transpires here. The Chronarch Collective isn't the only power with interest in Zenith's creation, merely the most immediately concerning. With that cryptic statement, he stepped back, allowing Ben to enter the chamber alone. The spherical space sealed behind him, environmental systems adjusting automatically to optimize conditions for the transformation process. At the chamber's center, Ben stood with calm resolve despite the unprecedented situation. The red ultimatrix pulsed with steadily increasing frequency, crimson energy beginning to flow visibly beneath his SK. In his neural pathways completed their preparatory reconfiguration. Outside the chamber, Alina's monitoring systems activated, displaying Ben's accelerating biometrics across multiple holographic screens. Esther established chronological anchoring through her neural interface, stabilizing the chamber's temporal field against external fluctuations. Kai directed the station's defensive systems, distributing power between protection and observation priorities. Within the isolated environment, Ben felt the first waves of transformation beginning, not as pain but as expansion, consciousness extending beyond previous limitations to perceive reality with unprecedented clarity. The red ultimatrix is pulsing synchronized perfectly with his heartbeat, no longer distinguishable as a separate rhythm. Phase 3 integration commencing, the device announced, its voice resonating directly in Ben's mind rather than audible sound. Evolutionary ascension protocols activated, crimson energy enveloped his form completely. Molecular structures beginning to reconfigure at the most fundamental level. Yet unlike previous transformations where his human consciousness adapted to an alien form, this PROCESS worked in reverse. His essential awareness remained the focal point while reality itself seemed to transform around him. He perceived evolutionary pathways with crystal clarity, not just for his own form but for all life. Countless potential developments branching across probability space in infinite complexity. The temptation to direct these pathways, to optimize them according to perceived ideals, arose naturally from this expanded awareness. This, Ben realized, was the critical juncture Paradox had described, the moment when enhanced perception could lead to interventionist control, setting in motion the catastrophic future Esther had witnessed. With conscious intent, he focused instead on understanding rather than directing, perception without manipulation. The transformation continued, genetic structures reconfiguring with precision beyond conventional science. Ben felt his consciousness expanding exponentially, capabilities evolving that would have seemed godlike from his previous perspective. Yet through this metamorphosis, he maintained focus on the connections established before entering the chamber: Alina's understanding, Esther's warning, Kai's challenge, Paradox's guidance. These relationships anchored his core identity as the transformation reached its peak, consciousness expanding to perceive multiple dimensional states simultaneously while maintaining essential human values and perspectives. Outside the chamber, the monitoring systems registered unprecedented energy readings as the ascension approached completion. The station's temporal sensors detected significant disturbances forming within the isolated environment, potential timeline branches proliferating at exponential rates before collapsing back into singular probability vectors as Ben's Sky's direction established pattern priority. He's doing it, Elena observed with professional amazement, nanites enhancing her perception of the data streams. Controlling the parameter meant during transformation rather than afterward. Esther's neural interface confirmed this assessment, chronological anchoring systems registering stability patterns unlike anything in her historical records. The temporal signature is forming differently, more contained, less detectable across dimensional boundaries. Kai monitored both the transformation progress and the approaching Chronarch fleet, dividing her attention between immediate threat and ongoing metamorphosis. The extraction vessels have established preliminary containment field perimeters. Estimated time to full temporal isolation, 18 minutes. Within the chamber, Ben had reached the final stage of ascension. His form had stabilized into something simultaneously familiar and unprecedented, recognizably human in Ba. IC configuration but evolved beyond conventional limitations. Crimson energy flowed through enhanced biological structures, consciousness expanded to perceive reality across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Most significantly, he maintained complete awareness of his essential identity throughout the transformation, core values intact, fundamental principles preserved, connections with others undiminished despite exponentially enhanced perception. As the process completed, the chamber's temporal isolation field adjusted automatically, containing the transformation's energy signature within parameters that would minimize detection across dimensional boundaries. The Red Ultimatrix, now fully integrated with Ben's evolved form, pulsed once with blinding intensity before settling in to harmonious synchronization with his enhanced biological systems. Outside, the monitoring systems registered completion approximately 16 minutes after initiation, significantly faster than projected in theoretical models. The chamber's seal disengaged automatically, environmental systems equalizing with the surrounding laboratory. Elena, Esther, and Kai watched with a mixture of scientific fascination and personal concern as the chamber opened to reveal Ben's transformed state. His appearance remained recognizably human but with subtle evolutionary enhancements, more efficient physiological structures, optimized neural configurations, enhanced sensory capabilities. The Red Ultimatrix no longer appeared as a distinct device on his wrist but rather an integrated component of his evolved biology. Crimson energy flowing seamlessly between technology and organic systems. Ben, Elena questioned cautiously, nanites analyzing his transformed state with scientific precision. He stepped from the chamber with fluid grace, movements reflecting perfect integration of enhanced capabilities and conscious control. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics beyond normal human range while remaining distinctly his own. "I'm still me," he confirmed, meeting each of their gazes with clear recognition. "Just more." Esther's neural interface scanned his transformed state, comparison A. Algorithms finding no match with historical records from her timeline. The temporal signature is completely different from documented parameters. Evolutionary capability present but configured for perception rather than manipulation. "You succeeded," Kai concluded, professional assessment confirming what her instincts already recognized, that Ben had navigated the ascension without losing his essential self to the enhanced capabilities. Before they could discuss the transformation further, the station's alert systems activated, proximity warnings indicating the Chronarch extraction fleet had accelerated their approach. "They've detected the ascension energy signature," Esther reported, neural interface interpreting the temporal distortion patterns. "But they're confused. The pattern doesn't match their harvesting parameters." Ben accessed the station's monitoring systems directly, his evolved consciousness interfacing with the technology without physical contact. They expected a specific temporal signature based on previous probability models. What actually occurred doesn't align with their harvesting criteria. Which gives us an opportunity, Kai realized, strategic mind. Immediately identifying tactical advantage. If they can't classify the signature, standard protocol would require assessment before committing to full extraction procedures. "We should leave while they're still evaluating," Elena suggested practically. "The station's temporal masking systems could cover our departure if we move quickly." Ben considered their options with enhanced strategic analysis, perceiving probability vectors extending from each potential choice. "There's another possibility. Now that the ascension is complete, I may be able to establish direct communication with the collective, help them understand that evolutionary manipulation doesn't require destructive harvesting. Diplomatic engagement with the Chronarch collective has no successful precedents in historical records," Esther pointed out. Though her typical certainty seemed tempered by the unprecedented situation. There are no precedents for any of this, Ben countered. The ascension occurred differently than in your timeline, creating possibilities that didn't exist before. As they debated options, Paradox reappeared in their midst, his expression showing rare urgency. I'm afraid diplomatic Ove. Urchers will have to wait for another opportunity. The collective has deployed specialized hunter units specifically designed to capture the Red Ultimatrix technology. The station's sensors confirmed his warning, detecting smaller craft detaching from the harvester vessels, similar to those they had encountered previously but with enhanced capabilities focused on capture rather than standard temporal manipulation. How many? Kai asked, already directing defensive systems to priority targets. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.